This book is called Electromagnetics and War: The Employment of Scalar Wave Technology for Good and Evil by Hinrichs, PhD. Introduction. The history of electromagnetic theory begins with ancient measures to understand atmospheric electricity, especially lightning. People then had little understanding of electricity and were unable to explain the phenomena. Scientific understanding into the nature of electromagnetism grew throughout the 18th and 20th centuries through the work of researchers such as Ampere, Coulomb, Oersted, Faraday, Franklin, Maxwell, Heaviside, Tesla, Mal, Bearden, and many others. Because of centuries of scientific experimentation and continued advancement of knowledge, our lives have been considerably enhanced by the supply of electrical energy to power our homes, lives, and industries. Yet with every scientific advancement, there is potential for good and evil applications for its use, depending on the morality and intents of the users. The good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. Anyone who has experienced an electrical shock is aware of the obvious dangers of electricity, but the subtle users of EM are not as obvious. Electromagnetic pulses, which can destroy computer networks, mind control, and controls of individuals' behaviors, scalar, e.g., electrogravitational beams and death rays, weather and climate modification and disruption and destruction of the electrical power grids of the world. This book will discuss a wide range of beneficial uses of electromagnetism, medical procedures, diathermy, supply of relativity, inexpensive and free energy, as well as some of the dangers and destructive technologies which threaten human existence on this planet, such as scalar weapons, electromagnetic warfare, and electromagnetic biological EMBM warfare. Robert Oppenheimer once warned us about the sin against humanity of physicists employing weapons of mass destruction against God's creation. Despite the vision and the far-seeing wisdom of our wartime heads of state, the physicists felt a peculiarly intimate responsibility for supporting, and in the end, in large measure, for achieving the realization of atomic weapons. Nor can we forget that these weapons, as they were in fact used, dramatized so mercilessly in the inhumanity and evil of modern warfare, in some sort of crude sense which no vulgarity, no humor, no overstatement can quite extinguish. The physicists have known sin, and this is knowledge which they cannot lose. There are profound implications regarding the use of electromagnetic energy to destroy human life, and our choice of world leaders can affect humanity's future for good or evil. In the 1930s, the Soviets obtained some of Nikola Tesla's scientific documents, while the West ignored his findings. By 1981, the Soviet Union had discovered and weaponized the Tesla scalar wave effects. There is also evidence, mostly classified, that the spy plane piloted by Gary Powers in 1960 was destroyed by these weapons. The most advanced U.S. nuclear submarine, the USS Thresher, was also sent to a watery grave in 1963, with 129 American sailors using scalar weaponry. There are several Tesla devices of note, but the most powerful of these frightening weapons is the Tesla howitzer. It was completed at the Sarashagin missile range and presently considered to be either a high-energy laser or a particle beam weapon. Today, in the 21st century, Britain, China, Russia, and the United States are actively continuing research in scalar weaponry, but the United States is slightly behind the race. Scientists in the West ignored Tesla in the 1930s while his research was stolen by Soviet and German agents. The key concept is that scalar waves restore certain useful aspects of Maxwell's equations. which were omitted by Oliver Heaviside. The scientific evolution of classical electrodynamics was flawed due to the omissions in the 19th century by Heaviside, Hertz, and Gibbs. The simplifications of Maxwell's equations by deleting the magnetic flux contributions to energy fields has had widespread implications for the use of scalar devices to improve the quality of human life on the planet or to destroy it. Russian energetics scientists corrected the electromagnetic models and went to develop the classified unified field theory. This led to the development of the powerful scalar interferometer superweapons. The Soviets in 1985 once threatened the Earth itself by activating their scalar weapons with multiple scalar transmitters turned on simultaneously, endangering the survival of the entire planet. Per nuclear physicist Thomas Bearden, they conducted a massive full-up scalar weapons system and communication strategic exercise. During this exercise, American Frank Golden discovered that the Russians had activated 27 gigantic power taps. These were established by resonating the Earth electrogravitationally on 54 powerful scalar frequencies. 27 pairs where the two are separated from each other by 12 kilohertz. Transmitted into the Earth. The Soviets utilized this to stimulate the Earth and to force electrogravitational resonance on all 54 frequencies. Each of the 27 power taps extracted enormous energy from the molten core of Earth itself and turning it into an ordinary electrical power. Each giant tap was capable of powering 4 to 6 of the largest scalar EM howitzers possessed by Russia. Bearden wrote, apparently over 100 giant scalar EM weapons were activated and a large number of command and control transmissions, and it lasted several days. By alternating the potentials and loads of each of the two paired transmitters, electrical energy in the enormous amounts can be extracted from the Earth itself, fed by the giant cathode that is the Earth's molten core. Scalar EM command and control systems, including high data rate communications with underwater submarines, were also activated on a massive scale. The exercise went on for several days as power taps were switched in and out, and command and control systems went up and down. Bearden claims not one American intelligence lab or scientist detected this, as they didn't have a detector for scalar EM radiation, and that not one officially believes that this exercise ever happened. However, it was monitored on an advanced proprietary detection system by Frank Golden for several days and by Bearden for several hours. A secondary purpose of this book is to integrate moral considerations into the decision to promote and develop potentially dangerous technologies. An informed and intelligent citizenry has the right to challenge the use of destructive technologies and to prevent their employment. This citizenry does not exist and is kept in the dark by governments of the world. Matthew 12:35. A good man out of the good treasure of the heart bringeth forth good things, and an evil man out of the evil treasure bringeth forth evil things. There are also many translations of the source documents in several foreign languages, which allow my language students to gain a technical and scientific vocabulary and to be able to read some original European dissertations and research studies. 1. The source of electromagnetic radiation. The sun radiates energy equally in all directions, and the Earth intercepts and receives part of this energy. The power flux reaching the top of the Earth's atmosphere is about 1400 watts per meter squared. What this means in practical terms is that on an average, 1 square meter of the side of the Earth facing the sun receives energy from the sun equal to that from approximately 1400-watt light bulbs every second. It can be seen from the chart of the electromagnetic spectrum that as visible light passes through the atmosphere. 2. Electromagnetics from Hans Christian Ørsted to Nikola Tesla, Konstantin Mell, Thomas Bearden, and many others. Continual progress has been made in science with many contributors. Max Planck observed that it was not by any accident that the greatest thinkers of all ages were deeply religious souls. Since the devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki by the atomic bomb in 1945, there seems to be little restriction of the use of weapons of mass destruction in warfare. Some of the greatest scientific discoveries in history are flawed by false assumptions, oversimplification of complex relationships, reductionism, and the omission of significant contribution factors. This includes such great scientific contributors to electromagnetic theory and practice as Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla, Oliver Heaviside, and Josiah Willard Gibbs. Benjamin Franklin investigated electricity and tested theories with an extremely dangerous experiment of having his son fly a kite through a storm-threatened sky. A key attached to the kite string sparked and charged a Leyden jar, which stored electrical charge. Thus, he established the link between lightning and electricity. Resulting from these experiments, he invented the lightning rod, which we still use today in various configurations. Benjamin Franklin understood Sorry, that's in another language. Next paragraph. A lightning arrestor is a device which is placed on the roof of a building to protect it from the damaging lightning can cause. The lightning is led down to a conductor which spreads the charge into the ground. The lightning conductor was first constructed in 1752 by Benjamin Franklin. Nikola Tesla is shown here in his laboratory in 1899, sitting under a huge arc discharge. Tesla, seated, making notes, succeeded in generating artificial lightning in his laboratory in Colorado Springs by using coils he designed for this purpose. The experiment proved his theory that the Earth was a condenser, he said. Tesla never revealed the other principles he said he discovered in this laboratory, which has long been since destroyed. Hans Christian Ørsted, often spelled Orsted in English, lived from August 1777 through 9th of March 1851. By the 19th century, the Danish physicist Hans Christian Ørsted had established that electricity and magnetism were related, and their theories were unified. He discovered that wherever charges are in motion, electric current results, and magnetism results from this current. The source for an electric field are these electric charges, and the magnetic field is caused by electric currents, that is, electric charges in motion. He was a Danish physicist and chemist who discovered that electric currents create magnetic fields and was the first to establish the connection between electricity and magnetism. That relation is known today as Ørsted's law. He shaped post-Kantian philosophy and advances in science throughout the late 19th century. The Ørsted Park in Copenhagen was named after Ørsted in 1879. The streets H.C. Ørsted Veg in Frederiksberg and H.C. Ørsted Allé is located in Galten are also named after him. The buildings that are home to the Department of Chemistry and the Institute for Mathematical Sciences at the University of Copenhagen's North Campus are named for H.C. Ørsted Institute after him. A student's dormitory named H.C. Ørsted Collegiate is in Odense. First Danish satellite launched 1999 was named after Ørsted. H.C. Ørsted often, sorry, that's in another language. He alternates between English and German in the text, so I have to skip that again. In 1824, Ørsted founded Selskabik for Naturlærernes Udbredel dels SNU, a society to disseminate knowledge of the natural sciences. He was also the founder of predecessor organizations which eventually became the Danish Meteorological Institute and the Danish Patent and Trademark Office. Oersted was the first modern thinker to explicitly describe and name the thought experiment. The leader of the so-called Danish Golden Age, Oersted was a close friend of Hans Christian Andersen and the brother of politician and jurist Anders Sando Oersted, who eventually served as a Danish prime minister, 1853 through 1854. The Oersted, abbreviated O, capital O-E, abbreviated capital O-E, the CGS unit of magnetic H field strength is named after him. Oersted was born in Rudkobing. As a young boy, Oersted developed his interest in science while working for his father, who owned a pharmacy. Hans Christian Oersted that goes into other language. He and his brother Anders received most of their early education through self-study at home, going to Copenhagen in 1793 to take entrance exams for the University of Copenhagen, where both brothers excelled academically. By 1796, Oersted had been awarded honors for his papers in both aesthetics and physics. He earned his doctorate in 1799 for a dissertation based on the works of Kant entitled The Architectonics of Natural Metaphysics. Homeschooling really works for motivated students. In 1801, Oersted received a travel scholarship and public grant which enabled him to spend 3 years traveling across Europe. In Germany, he met Johann Wilhelm Ritter, a physicist who believed there was a connection between electricity and magnetism. This made sense to Oersted since he believed in Kantian ideas about the unity of nature and that deep relationships existed between natural phenomenon. The concept that there was unity of matter, energy, and spiritual phenomenon was widespread in European scientific communities and still fascinates and inspires researchers to search for meaning and order in the universe. It inspired the Danish-German scientist Gustavus Desleff Hinrichs to find mathematical relationships between the orbits of the planets, which were like the rotations of electrons around the nucleus of atoms. This then led to his development of one of the first models of the periodic nature of the chemical elements. Some of the most illuminating ideas concerning spiritual and material interrelationships were developed in the 20th century by the Dane, Martinus. He interpreted the difference between material science and the spiritual science as follows. There is, however, this difference between the two sciences, that while material science can be understood and accepted by intelligence and thus appear in actual fact, spiritual science can certainly not be accepted by intelligence alone, even if said mental capacity naturally constitutes a strongly contributory factor. Here, in the first place, one must have an extremely well-developed potentiality for benevolence and love, as well as an indispensable intuitive capacity for cosmic perception. The Holy Spirit, which thus constitutes the very highest science, cannot possibly belong to a certain nation. It cannot possibly be Danish or German. It cannot be American or English, just as it cannot be theosophical, anthroposophical, spiritualistic, or Martinian. It is to the very highest degree international, indeed interplanetary, or even every imaginable way non-individual. It is the life in which we all live and move and have our being. It is the omnipresent Spirit of God that moves upon the face of the waters. Martinez quoted from Spiritual Science, English Cosmos, number 3, 2000. In the history of science, ever since the famous trial of Galileo, has repeatedly been claimed that scientific truth cannot be reconciled with the religious interpretation of the world. Although I am now convinced that scientific truth is unassailable in its own field, I have never found it possible to dismiss the content of religious thinking as simply part of an outmoded phase in the consciousness of mankind, a part we shall have to give up from now on. Thus, in the course of my life, I have repeatedly been compelled to ponder on the relationship of these two regions of though, for I have never been able to doubt the reality of that which they point. Quote by Werner Heisenberg. Their conversations drew Ørsted into the study of physics. He became a professor of the University of Copenhagen in 1806 and continued his research with the electric currents and acoustics. Under his guidance, the university developed a comprehensive physics and chemistry program and established new laboratories. In 1800, Alessandro Volta invented a galvanic battery, inspiring Ørsted to think about the nature of electricity and to conduct his first electrical experiments. Between 1800 and 1803, he visited to Germany, France, and Holland for lectures. Ørsted welcomed William Christopher Zeiss to his family home in autumn 1806, taking the then young chemist and fellow son of pharmacist under his care and giving him encouragement while offering him a position as his lecturing assistant. In 1812, he again visited Germany and France after publishing a manual called Wissenschaben om Naturens Almindelige Love and Forsted, Indeling till den Almindelige Naturel, 1811. Zwischen 1800, sorry. In Berlin, he wrote his famous essay of the identity of chemical and electrical forces, in which he first stated the connection existing between magnetism and electricity. In Paris, he translated that essay into Latin with Marcel de Serres. The manual translated to English is called On the Electricity Excited by the Mere Contact of Conducting Substances of Different Kinds. It was Alessandro Volta's paper announcing his invention on the wet pile in the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society in 1800. The Royal Society of London gave him the Copley Medal, and the French Academy awarded him with 3,000 gold francs. Ørsted was just 43 when he made this great discovery. He established the Royal Polytechnic Institute in 1829, of which he was the first director. The Royal Society of London gave him on 21 April 1820 during a lecture. Ørsted noticed a compass needle deflected from magnetic north when an electric current from a battery was switched on and off, confirming a direct relationship between electricity and magnetism. His initial interpretation was that magnetic effects radiate from all sides of a wire, carrying an electric current, as do light and heat. 3 months later, he began more intensive investigations and soon thereafter published his findings, knowing that an electric current produces a circular magnetic field as it flows through a wire. This discovery was not due to mere chance, since Ørsted had been looking for a relation between electricity and magnetism for several years. The special symmetry of the phenomenon was possibly one of the difficulties that retarded the discovery. It is sometimes claimed that the Italian Gian Domenico Romanoschi was the first person who found a relationship between electricity and magnetism about 2 decades before Ørsted 1820 discovery of electromagnetism. Romagnossi's experiments showed that an electric current from a voltaic pile could deflect a magnetic needle. Oersted's findings stirred much research into electrodynamics throughout the scientific community, influencing French physicist André-Marie Ampère's developments of a single mathematical formula to represent the magnetic forces between current-carrying conductors. Oersted's work also represented a major step toward a unified concept of energy. Oersted was searching for the connection between those two great forces of nature. His previous writings bear witness to this, and I, who associated with him daily in the years 1818 to 1819, can state from my own experience that the thought of discovering this still mysterious connection constantly filled his mind. Quote from Johann Georg Forchhammer, 1794 to 1865. Number 3, the second great unification in physics. James Clerk Maxwell, 13 June 1831 to 5th of November 1879, was a Scottish scientist in the field of mathematical physics. His most notable achievement was to formulate the classical theory of electromagnetic radiation, bringing together for the first time electricity, magnetism, and the light as manifestations of the same phenomenon. Maxwell's equations for electromagnetism have been called the second great unification in physics, after the first one realized by Isaac Newton. James Clerk Maxwell whose equations are a set of partial differential equations that, together with the Lorentz force law, form the foundation of classical electromagnetism, classical optics, and electric circuits. They are the basis of all electric, optical, and radio technologies such as power generation, electric motors, wireless communication, cameras, television, computers, etc. Maxwell's equations describe how electric and magnetic fields are generated by charges, currents, and changes of each other. One important consequence of the equations is that the fluctuating electric and magnetic fields can propagate at the speed of light. This electromagnetic radiation manifests itself in manifold ways, from radio waves to light and X or Y rays. The equations are named after the physicist and the mathematician James Clerk Maxwell, who between 1861 and 1862 published an early form of the equations and first proposed that light is an electromagnetic phenomenon. With the publication of A Dynamical Theory of the Electromagnetic Field in 1865, Maxwell demonstrated that electric and magnetic field travels through space as waves move at the speed of light. Maxwell proposed that light is an undulation in the same medium that is the cause of electric and magnetic phenomenon. The unification of light and electrical phenomenon led to the prediction of the existence of radio waves. Working on the problem further, Maxwell showed that the equations predict the existence of waves of oscillating electric and magnetic fields that travel through empty space at the speed that could be predicted from simple electrical experiments. Using the data available at the time, Maxwell obtained a velocity of 310,740,000 meters per second. His famous 20 equations in the first modern form of 4 partial differential equations first appeared in fully developed form in his textbook, A Treatise on Electricity and Magnetism, in 1873. Maxwell expressed electromagnetism in the algebra of quaternions and made the electromagnetic potential the centerpiece of his theory. In 1881, Oliver Heaviside replaced Maxwell's electromagnetic potential field by force fields as the foundation of electromagnetic theory. Heaviside reduced the complexity of Maxwell's theory down to 4 differential equations, now known collectively as Maxwell's laws or Maxwell's equations. Per Heaviside, the electromagnetic field potential was arbitrary and needed to be murdered. The use of scalar and vector potentials is now standard in the solution of Maxwell's equations. Except for Gauss's law for magnetism, stating that the total magnetic flux through a closed surface is zero, Maxwell's equations have accurately predicted electromagnetic phenomenon. This assumption was challenged years later with the discovery of magnetic monopoles. The net magnetic flux out of any closed surface is zero. This amounts to a statement about the sources of magnetic field. For a magnetic dipole, any closed surface, the magnetic flux directed inward toward the south pole will equal the flux outward from the north pole. The net flux will always be zero for dipole sources. If there were a magnetic monopole source, this would give a non-zero area integral. The divergence of a vector field is proportional to the point source density. So the form of Gauss's law for a magnetic field states that there are no magnetic monopoles, which contradicts discoveries of magnetic dipoles in the 20th century. The electric flux of any closed surface is proportional to the total charge enclosed within the surface. Number 4, Gauss's law for electricity. The integral form of Gauss's law finds application in calculating electric fields around charged objects. In applying Gauss's law to the electric field of a point charge, one can show that it's consistent with Coulomb's law. While the area integral of the electric field gives a measure of the net charge enclosed, that a divergence of the electric field gives a measure of the density of sources. It also has implications for the conservation of charge. In other words, the contribution to magnetic flux for a given area is equal to the area times the component of the magnetic field perpendicular to the area. For a closed surface, the sum of magnetic flux is always equal to zero. If only magnetic dipoles exist according to Gauss's law for magnetism. No matter how small the volume, the magnetic sources are always dipole sources, like miniature bar magnets, so that there are as many magnetic field lines coming in to the South Pole as out from the North Pole. Nearly 85 years after pioneering theoretical physicist Paul Dirac predicted the possibility of the existence of magnetic monopoles, an international collaboration led by the Amherst College physics professor David S. Hall, 91, and Aalto University, Finland academic research fellow Mikko Machinen has identified and photographed synthetic magnetic monopoles in Hall's laboratory on the Amherst campus. The groundbreaking accomplishment paves the way for the detection of the particles in nature, which would be revolutionary development comparable to the discovery of the electron. This was reported in a paper co-authored by Hall, Matonen, Amherst postdoctoral research associate Michael Ray, Sagat Kandel, and Finnish graduate student Emmy Rukowski in the journal Nature. The creation of a synthetic magnetic monopole should provide us with unprecedented insight into aspects of the natural magnetic monopole, if indeed it exists, said Hall, explaining the implications of his work. Ray, the paper lead author and first to discover the monopoles in the laboratory, stated, "This is an incredible discovery. To be able to confirm the work of one of the most famous physicists is probably a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I am proud and honored to have been part of this great collaborative effort." Ordinarily, magnetic poles come in pairs. They have both a north pole and a south pole. As the name suggests, however, a magnetic monopole is a magnetic particle possessing only a single, isolated pole. A north pole without a south pole, or vice versa. In 1931, Dirac published a paper that explored the nature of these monopoles in the context of quantum mechanics. Despite extensive experimental searches since then in everything from lunar samples, moon rock, to ancient fossilized minerals, no observation of naturally occurring magnetic monopole has yet been confirmed. The Large Hadron Collider at CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, should continue searching for magnetic monopoles as a result of the discovery of the synthetic monopole by Hall's team. Magnetic monopoles were predicted to be quite commonly to early theoretic models of the Big Bang Theory. Currently, a special model for the expansion of the universe in vogue predicts that these particles will be extremely rare. The Earth has a magnetosphere that affects the life of most creatures on Earth. Earth's magnetism is very weak, from 0.3 Gauss at the equator to 0.7 Gauss at the poles. It has been well known that many living organisms are sensitive to the magnetic field of the Earth, including some geomagnetically sensitive bacteria. The migration of monarch butterflies, Canadian geese, and salmon to their breeding grounds is evidence of their response to the Earth's magnetic field. Stray and lost dogs and cats have been known to travel hundreds of miles to their homes locations using geomagnetic sensitivities. Studying how bacteria interact with geomagnetic fields has contributed to understanding how higher organisms react also. Geomagnetically responsive animals have something in common with the ferromagnetic detection systems in bacteria. Cell motility caused by a magnetic field is called magnetotaxis. Taxis refers to the effect of the magnetic field to influence the swimming direction, but not the absolute velocity of cell movement. When a magnet was brought near a microscope, the cell's motion was demonstrably affected. Hundreds of swimming cells were instantly turned around and repelled from the end of the magnet. A magnetotactic green alga belonging to the genus Colemandohas was discovered by H. Lenz B. Barros et al. In polluted brackish coastal lagoon of Brazil. These eukaryotic cells possessed a permanent magnetic dipole moment estimated to be 10 times greater than those of magnetotactic bacteria cells. Because of their cell polarity, they are still downward in the geomagnetic field. Researchers discovered magnetic bacteria living in the ponds and lakes, presenting a chain of magnetic crystals inside their cells. Those located in the northern hemisphere swim in the direction of the magnetic north, while those from the southern hemisphere swim in the direction of the magnetic south. These bacteria live in environments with poor oxygen supply. In 2004, tiny deposits of a mineral called magnetite, a lodestone, were discovered in the beaks of pigeons and bobolink, a North American songbird. If a small magnet impairs their reception of the Earth's magnetism, or the area has a natural disturbance of the terrestrial magnetisms, pigeons get disoriented and cannot find the way back on long distances. European robins and 20 songbirds and pigeons were proven to rely on Earth's magnetic field to navigate during their seasonal migrations. In fact, migratory birds are believed to use magnetism, rather than sight, to make their long journeys. Birds and many non-mammal magnetic sensitive animals are known to perceive this inclination, using Earth's magnetic field's inclination to assess relative latitude. This angle is 90 degrees at the poles, perpendicular to Earth, and 0 degrees in the equatorial area, parallel to Earth. There are bird species like Arctic tern, which use this information to make annual journeys from the North Pole to the South Pole and back. The researchers put the magnetism detection on light exposure, magnetite receptors, or both. Chickens detect the terrestrial magnetism as well, and their magnetic sensors could be in the eye. This presumption is based on an experiment that revealed that the birds could orient themselves under blue light, but totally lost the sense of direction under longer wavelength lighting. Entangled quantum state of magnetic dipoles. Free magnetic moments usually manifest themselves in Curie laws, where weak external magnetic fields produce magnetizations that vary as the reciprocal of the temperature 1/T. For a variety of materials that do not display static magnetism, including doped semiconductors and the rare earth intermetallics, the 1/T law is replaced by the power law T negative with greater than 1. Here we show that a much simpler material system, namely the insulating magnetic salt, can also display such a power law. Moreover, by comparing the results of numerical simulations of this system with susceptibility of specific heat data, we show that both energy level, splitting, and quantum entanglement are crucial to describing its behavior. The second of these quantum mechanical effects, entanglement, where the wave function of a system with several degrees of freedom cannot be written as a product of wave functions for each degree of freedom, becomes visible for remarkably small tunneling terms and is activated well before tunneling has visible effects on the spectrum. This finding is significant because it shows that entanglement, rather than energy level redistribution, can underlie the magnetic behavior of a simple insulating quantum spin system. To find a magnetic monopole is a holy grail of physics. A magnetic monopole is the magnetic version of a charged particle like an electron, and for the last 70 years, physicists have believed that one might exist somewhere in the universe. Magnetic monopoles have been searched for particle physicists for a long time. In 1931, Paul Dirac postulated existence of a fundamental particle to explain why electrons and protons carry electrical charges of the same size. This is surprising because the elements of the protons and electrons are completely different fundamental particles. Dirac, however, argued that the existence of a single magnetic monopole would be enough to explain that the charges of all fundamental particles must be quantized, i.e., exactly an integer multiplied of an elementary charge. The newly discovered artificial monopoles fulfill exactly this quantization requirement. The monopoles discovered are not that holy grail, but are the next best thing. Rather than existing throughout the universe, they only exist within a special type of material called spin ice. They can be imagined as the north and south poles of magnets, but free to float around independently within the material. However, someone living within a block of spin ice would think that these are exactly those magnetic monopoles long sought by physicists. The research shows how certain real materials, in this case spin ice, create within themselves things that resemble the basic particles by which the universe is composed. Quote, the amazing thing about spin ice monopoles, quote, Professor Bramwell states, quote, is how perfectly they are. They really do look like those monopoles expected to exist somewhere in the universe. Why nature should reproduce a mini universe within a material we do not know yet. End quote. As well as having implications for fundamental physics, the monopoles could be harnessed in the way that electrical charges are for technology. Scientists are currently researching the questions of whether magnetic whorls could be used in the production of computer components. If possible, they would also have to create and destroy whorls. Magnetic monopoles would then play an important role in this. The discovery of magnetic monopoles changed that. Then along came Dr. Konstantin Mail and the revelation of the physical basis of life. Mail was awarded his doctorate at the University of Stuttgart in 1984 and was appointed professor at the Fachhochschule Furtwangen in 1986, which was renamed Furtwangen University of Applied Sciences. There he is a lecturer for power electronics as well as a drivetrain technology and control engineering. Mail also argues that classical electrodynamics is incomplete based on Maxwell's equations and must be replaced by a theory which he himself has established. The main terms are potential vertebra, scalar wave, or neutrino power, regarding the theory of expansion of the Earth. He claims to have developed a uniform field theory for which all known interactions are derivable. However, it is in contradiction to the established physical theories of electrodynamics, which also contradicts Einstein's special theory of relativity. The orthodox scientific community does not uniformly accept Mail's theory and demonstrated evidence of the presence of scalar waves, but then Galileo and Tesla were not acknowledged in their day either. The University of Furtwangen has distanced itself from Mail's ideas, pointing out that they are not scientifically and methodically not recognizable, but highly controversial in the professional world, and clarified that they are not the subject of his activities at the faculty. Furthermore, Mail is not permitted to give lectures at the university on his theories. Mail's critics include the mathematics professor Gerhard Brun and Klaus Keck. Brun has shown mathematical errors and contradictions made by Mail in his derivation of his theory. Beyond these skeptics, Thomas Ibert has dealt with some of Mail's works for the Forschungsgemeinschaft Funk. And Mail's name is spelled M-E-Y-L. The Institute for Gravitational Research at the Gould Science Foundation has investigated Mail's experimental setup and concluded that all observations in classical electrodynamics could be explained by transmission with transversal electromagnetic waves. Clearly, a controversy exists which future scientists must resolve. Konstantin Mail changes the theory of expansion of the Earth, which is no longer represented in the scientific academic environment, in the sense that it is not either ether, but the absorption of neutrinos from the universe that allow the Earth to expand. Isaac Newton formulated the law of gravity in Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, published 5th of July, 1687. It states that the gravitational force exerted between two bodies is proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. In the framework of classical mechanics, the gravitational attraction is described by Newton's law of universal gravitation, which states that the force of gravitational attraction between two masses of material objects, separated by a distance proportional to both masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance, that is. Here, the gravitational constant wavelength is equal to approximately 6.67 times 10th to the negative 11th meter to the third divided by kilograms times second squared. Mail's article on intercellular communication using scalar waves was removed from two scientific journals and a conference volume after the editors had determined that Mail had published the article with nearly the same content 4 times. Contrary to the equations expressing Gauss's law for magnetism, Konstantin Mell has shown that magnetic monopoles do exist. This has profound implications for explaining the physical basis of life. From an electromagnetic as well as a biological basis, potential vortices are an essential component of a scalar waves as discovered in 1990. The basic approach for an extended field theory was confirmed in 2009 with the discovery of magnetic monopoles. For the first time, this provides the opportunity to explain the physical basis of life, not only from the biological discipline. Nature covers the whole spectrum of known scientific fields of research, and interdisciplinary understanding is required to explain its complex relationships. To get to the bottom of the theories advocated and developed by Mell, it is useful to follow the development of electromagnetic theory from Oersted to Faraday and Heaviside, greatly illuminated by the revolutionary experiments and patents of Nikola Tesla, and culminating with the scientific work of Mell and Bearden. The applications of electromagnetic, gravitational, and scalar wave technologies will be examined, particularly with respect to the weapons of mass destruction developed by the Soviets during the Cold War. Additionally, some biomedical applications of scalar technology, which can have helpful benefits to humankind, will also be discussed. Number 5, Faraday and the construction of the electric generator. Michael Faraday began the first practical application of electromagnetic theory with his construction of the electric generator. The horseshoe-shaped magnet, A, created a magnetic field through the disk, D. When the disk was turned, this induced an electric current radially outward from the center toward the rim. The current flowed out through the sliding spring contact M, through the external circuit, and back into the center of the disk through the axle. Faraday's sky The first usable generator was constructed in 1867 in Germany, and the design exploited the Hans Christian Ørsted's discovery of electromagnetism. Werner von Siemens, who had already been successful as an industrialist, was now taking an active part in the future development of electrical energy technology. Thus, he used the improvements of already electrical operated machines, which, however, needed an external current source so they could supply electricity. In 1867, Werner von Siemens introduced his improved model. This enabled the cost-effective and flexible generation of electricity and justified the use of large power technology. Electric generators operated with a magnetic field. Initially, they used iron magnets, which were, however, because of their size and weight of large-scale electricity production. Siemens developed a small electromagnetic machine without a battery and permanent magnets, which could be turned in one direction without any effort at any speed. A strong electric current was generated in such a way that their wire windings quickly heated. In electricity generation, a generator is a device that converts mechanical energy to electrical energy for use in an external circuit. Sources of mechanical energy include steam turbines, gas turbines, water turbines, internal combustion engines, and even hand cranks. The first electromagnetic generator, the Faraday disk, was built in 1831 by British scientist Michael Faraday. Today, generators provide nearly all the power for electric power grids worldwide. The Chinese power grid is powered by coal, which makes electric vehicles more polluting than comparable gasoline cars. Per Danish experts, the Chinese value the independence from foreign oil imports higher than cleaner air. Application of the energy principles discovered by Tesla and Mill could go a long way in meeting the world energy requirements without resorting to the continual conflict over Middle East oil resources, which has resulted in the deaths of millions of people and squandering of trillions of dollars. In 1825, Oersted also made a significant contribution to chemistry by producing aluminum for the first time. While an aluminum iron alloy had previously been developed by British scientist and inventor Humphrey Davy, Oersted was the first to isolate the element via a reduction of aluminum chloride. In 1829, Oersted founded Den Polytechnisk Lorenstad College of Advanced Technology, which was later renamed the Technical University of Denmark, or DTU. Oersted died at Copenhagen in 1851, aged 73, and was buried at Assistens Cemetery in the same city. The centimeter-gram second system, CGS, unit of magnetic induction of Oersted, is named for Oersted's contribution to the field of electromagnetism. A statue of Hans Christian Oersted was installed in the Oersted Park in 1880. A commemorative plaque is located above the gate on the building in Stuttestrade, where he lived and worked. The 100 Danske kroner note issued from 1950 to 1970 carried an engraving of Oersted. Oersted was also a published writer and poet. His poetry series, Luftskibet, or The Airship, was inspired by the balloon flights of a fellow physicist and stage magician, Etienne Gaspard Ribert. Shortly before his death, he submitted a collection of articles for publication under the title The Soul in Nature. The book presents Oersted's life philosophy and views on a wide variety of issues. Oersted confirmed Boyle's and Mariette's studies of the compressibility of air. He generally attributed to the discovery of electromagnetism, which happened in 1820. The relationship between electricity and magnetism was already demonstrated in 1802 by Romagnosi, but this was largely unknown in scientific circles. Oersted's discovery, however, was immediately recognized in the scientific community, and others worked on with the discovery, including Faraday, who discovered induction, while Maxwell in 1873 formulated a conclusive theory of electromagnetism. He constructed a piezometer and discovered the element aluminum. He was also interested in language and created several new Danish words, including oxygen and hydrogen. He spent his childhood and early youth in Rudobing until he and his 1 year younger brother, Anders, in 1793 moved to Copenhagen. The teaching the brothers got home that was distinctive. A German wig maker gave them their first lessons. The wig maker tried to inspire them with admiration for everything that was German, were looking for another teacher, a Norwegian student to highlight Norway over Denmark in their eyes. But through their unusually large inquisitive, replaced by the widespread self-study in different directions, was what was missing in traditional teaching. How well they followed with the passage of political and religious movements portraying the younger brother living of my life and my time history. In 1794, excuse me. In 1794, they were both students. Then, after a brief preparation consisted its second exam at the university, with distinction in all subjects, and because of their kinship with the founder, got their room on Elders College. Early interest in chemistry. Oersted had since he was 12 years been a student in his father's pharmacy. Chemistry interested him, and he read everything he could get a hold of chemical content. His study was therefore pharmacology, and when he took in 1797 his pharmaceutical exam, he impressed the examiners by his maturity and skill. While he was studying for the exam, he successfully answered two of the university's prize issues, one of the aesthetics, the second of chemical content. Like his brother, Oersted was early on heavily influenced by Immanuel Kant, an evidence in his doctoral thesis, 1799, a Latin treatise translated into Danish entitled The Basics of Natural Metaphysics. He followed here Kant almost word for word and said it as critical philosophies claim that all laws of nature should be derived from our ability to know nature. Johannes Kepler acknowledged his creator to the Bavarian chancellor in 1599 thusly: "Those laws of nature are within the grasp of the human mind. God wanted us to recognize them by creating us after his own image so that we could share in his own thoughts." Quote, Johannes Kepler. Letter, April 1599, to the Bavarian Chancellor Hubert von Hohenberg, collected in Kerala, Baumgart, and Jamie Callan. Johannes Kepler Life and Letters, 1953. Alessandro's galvanic element. Number 6. The galvanic element. What brought Oersted into new research was Volta's discovery of the galvanic element in 1800. In that year, Oersted had taken over the management of the Lyon pharmacy under absence of the owner, Professor Manthe. Thus, he was able to experiment with Volta's piles and studied especially its chemical effects. To measure these, he constructed in 1801 an apparatus that was very reminiscent of Faraday voltmeter. He was eager to travel to meet prominent foreign chemists and physicists, but at that same time, he sought a professorship in physics. He left vacant by A.N. Ascham's death. That he did not, he had to settle for November 7th, 1800, to become an assistant professor at the university without pay. Under these circumstances, there was nothing that kept him home, and in the summer of 1801, he began his first trip abroad, funded by the Kapelske grant of $500 per year and $400 from the Fund for Public Use. Oersted holds a wire above a magnetic needle supported on a pivot. The needle is deflected when electric current flows through the wire. He traveled to Germany, where he met Johann Wilhelm Ritter in Weimar, for whom he had a great desire to meet. Oersted's admiration for Ritter was well deserved, but only shared a few of his contemporaries. Oersted immediately made friends with him and got him later with friends Xavier von Bader's help a position in Munich and worked during his stay in Paris to give him recognition and honors, but without success. The stay in Berlin was in many ways interesting and instructive. He received much knowledge in the house of well-known Miss Heinrich Hertz, where he demonstrated new electrical tests and met many eminent scientists. He heard lectures by Johann Gottlieb Fichte and Friedrich Schlegel and was in general in surroundings which appealed to him. Number 7. Morality and physical nature are intimately related. In Munich, he met Count Rumford, but greatly valued his acquaintance with Franz Bader, who, he said, quote, "He maintains that moral and physical nature are closely interdependent, and that without such connection, physics really is not worth having. He agrees in this respect both with Ritter and me." End quote. These are similar ideas which Ørsted tried to pursue later. The Ørsted unit was established by the IEC in 1930 in honor of the Danish physicist Hans Christian Ørsted. Ørsted discovered the connection between magnetism and electric current when a magnetic field produced by a current carrying copper bar deflected a magnetized needle during a lecture demonstration. Ørsted, abbreviated capital OE, is the unit of auxiliary magnetic field H in the CGS system of units. It is identical to Dine-Maxwell. The H field strength for a long solenoid wound with 79.58 turns per meter of a conductor carrying 1 amperes is approximately 1 Ørsted. The foregoing disclosure is exactly correct if the solenoid is considered of infinite length if the current spread evenly over its surface. The magnetic field B is the number of turns per unit length, sometimes called the turns density. The expression is an idealization to an infinite length solenoid, but provides a good approximation to the field of a long solenoid. The magnetic field is concentrated into a nearly uniform field in the center of a long solenoid. The field outside is weak and divergent. The Earth's magnetic field is about half a Gauss. The relative permeability of a magnetic iron is around 200. Ørsted is closely related to the Gauss, the CGS unit of magnetic flux density. In a vacuum where the magnetization field strength is 1 Ørsted, so that the magnetic field density is 1 Gauss, that indicates a medium having permeability S compared to the permeability of a vacuum. In December 1801, he moved to Paris, where he stayed a full year. He heard the lectures of Louis Nicolas Vauquelin, Antoine François de Fourcroy, Louis Jacques Thenard, and Claude Louis Berthollet, the chemistry of Jacques Charles and Jean-Baptiste Biot, and the physics of Georges Cuvier of natural history. He saw that he could learn a lot here, even though he was biased against the French scientific community, which is with its more exact mathematical character. This was in sharp contrast to the natural philosophical thinking. And although he often noticed how little he was acknowledged in Paris of the work done in other countries, he would find himself being asked if he knew what a platinum crucible was and if he had seen a galvanic element. Would he use the time there in the best way by hearing lectures, observing factories, and seeking personal acquaintance with the most renowned scientists? On his return in January 1804, Ørsted hoped to become a professor of physics, who was not taken seriously because of his interest in natural philosophy. However, he was awarded a salary of $300 for 30 years and as much as for his experiments. He had been left a collection of apparatus that had belonged to Dr. Thomas Bunsen, but he even had to rent rooms for his lectures. These mostly concerned chemical physics and were heavily attended also by women, so he could barely make room for the audience. In addition to serving as a teacher, he developed as a writer in later years in the natural philosophical direction. Specialized study interested him less. General views, even daring speculations, appealed to him more. For him, the question was not what are the characteristics of various acids or bases, but why do acids and bases neutralize each other? Or why cannot anything be added to water to dissolve a metal? Wherever there just was a hint of an answer to the last question, he did something significant. Of his thesis from the period, we highlighted reflections on history of chemistry, introductory lectures held in the winter of 1805 to 6, which Orsted's style and way of thinking emerges for the first time. During a stay in Berlin, Drew Orsted one of his most important writings, Geschichten der chemischen Naturgesetze, 1812. Firstly, an overview of the main substances and processes when he considered electric power from a chemical point of view. Finally, he suggested that the reason and that all bodies contain electric forces openly appear, since they are in balance with each other. He assumed that electrical forces propagate by vibrations induced by the distribution. Since the oscillation meet more or less resistance, there will be a corresponding heat. The light generated by electrical oscillations in poor conductors. Also, he investigated the relationship between electricity and magnetism. Oersted stood virtually alone with these views, and they achieved no recognition, since they were not based on any scientific consensus. Oersted himself did not develop them so that their importance was unable to be understood. It was not until much later possible to gain significant conclusions from his research. But Oersted could, however, when he discovered electromagnetism 8 years later, confirm his view of nature. For his discovery, Oersted himself stated the following in a series of lectures he delivered in spring 1820. The idea of relationship between electricity and magnetism was especially crucial with him. He sent a strong discharge through a fine platinum wire that was so effective that a magnetic needle in the area was visibly deflected. It was difficult for him to understand the impact nature, and he therefore suspended further investigation until he obtained a powerful galvanic battery. He resumed then the trials in July. On July 21, 1820, he released a short report in Latin on the trials. He detailed many experiments that showed that this was indeed an interaction between the two forces of nature, while the bodies that carry them and the surroundings did not influence the results. The importance of Oersted's discovery was immediately clear to all experts, and it became a basis for the series of discoveries that are associated with the names of André Marie Ampère and François Aragas, and ended 11 years later with Michael Faraday's discovery of induction. His contemporaries felt much that they were indebted to Oersted. There is testimony enough about that, and many academic honors were awarded to him from many admirers. Although it largely was others who drew upon the consequences of this discovery, it should be emphasized that Oersted showed that the law of action and reaction applies to electromagnetism. On the other hand, he failed to demonstrate the influence of Earth's magnetism on an electric current, stating that his lab apparatus lacked sufficient sensitivity. Oersted's rule, holding the right hand with fingers in the direction of flow, plus towards minus. Right palm should be between the compass and the cord. Compass magnetic north will then turn out to the thumb side. So when you give a thumbs up, your thumb points towards the north. In that thought experiment. In the last 20 years of Oersted's life were no greater scientific works from his hand, but a lot of his messages, often of original character, testifying to the interest and understanding with which he followed the progress of science. He maintained personal relationships by repeated trips abroad, even in his old age. Below should also mention his eager participation in the Nordic naturalist meetings, where he naturally occupied a very prominent place. Oersted was appointed professor ordinarius at the university on 18th of July, 1817, was constantly interested in spreading knowledge of science, also beyond the circle of his students. In this regard, he issued October 16th, 1823, an invitation to form a company for this purpose, although the case hardly found the connection that Oersted had expected. Was constituted the Society for the Dissemination of Natural Science on 16 March 1824 with the then Crown Prince Christian Frederick, later King Christian VIII, and as patron. This company, which still exists, was envisioned to advance Oersted's original ideas and support industrial companies and research, as well as support young people who were looking for technical training. Oersted was the company permanent director. It lacked, however, both human and financial resources to implement Oersted's plan. This was partially remedied by the creation of the Polytechnic. George Frederick Kruger Ursen submitted in 1827 to the king an application for the establishment of a polytechnic school. The case was submitted for the university's decision. In this context, the committee established in which Oersted was the sole. It proposed giving the proposed school a more scientific character than originally planned. After great financial difficulties were overcome, it was founded on 27 January 1829. Oersted was its first director, and a large part of the reputation it eventually won, and the spirit in which it is headed, was attributed to him. Oersted's lectures were heavily influenced by his whole personality and his highlight of spirit and nature's unity. They had a major attraction on the audience. His original plan to provide a comprehensive presentation of science was interrupted. Then, when he entered his experimental work after he had discovered electromagnetism, he developed this aspect of science so thoroughly and rapidly that it was difficult to describe adequately. Only the mechanical aspect of the natural sciences, which he completed and published many times in different formats, the first time in 1809 and later by Carl Valentin Holton in 1859, was contained in a detailed introductory section. Oersted's Verdenschaft, Oersted's Weltanschauung. Number 8. Hans Christian Oersted, Der Geist in der Natur, 1854. Like his brother, H.D. Oersted had a passionate interest in all aspects of life. His study of nature was not only restricted to the immersion in specific individual cases, but he dwelt with a fondness on great general fundamental questions, extending his analysis gradually to create an entire philosophy of nature, or even an entire system of existence, overlooking nothing. His whole zeitgeist tended toward an all-encompassing. This romantic natural philosophy had gained ground in Germany, and in his earlier work, Oersted was also partly been attracted to this direction, but it went with him as with Adam Oehlenschläger and F.C. Sibern. There was too much truth and health in Danish society even then, for it could gain a foothold here. Oersted was never a natural philosopher in German sense, but quickly learned to distinguish how far the idea could really take us and where the subjective imagination began. He emphasized constantly with great certainty that we always had to begin with observation and experimentation, and where possibly any time verified the following results before it could be established as fact. It was the eccentric German scientist Ritter who shared with Oersted in the conception of nature that natural forces are separate and distinctive units attached to individual phenomenon, but on the contrary make up a rounded whole, because they are ultimately derived from the same creative force. Nature's unity is not a mechanical system, but a living organism, which in many and various ways are associated with human activity. Man himself is a creature of nature and subject to its laws, with the only difference that human beings have consciousness. Number 9, Nikola Tesla, the greatest scientific genius of the 20th century. Wissenschaftliche Studien der Beweisen das Bewusstsein in die physische Welt einander beeinflussen. Scientific studies that prove consciousness and the physical world influence each other. Tesla put it best: from the day when science begins to analyze non-physical phenomena, more progress will be made in a decade than in all the centuries since its existence. To understand the true nature of the universe, one must think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Swami Vivekananda, an Indian Hindu monk and most important disciple of Ramakrishna in the 19th century, was Tesla's mentor. He says, "Science works best when it is in the harmony with nature. When we bring these together, we can make discoveries to great technologies, such as free energy, which only arise when the planet's consciousness is ready to accept them." How Nikola Tesla used spirituality and philosophy to learn about reality, unlimited research, unlimited energy resources, and science. Science works best when it is in harmony with nature. When we combine these two, we can discover great technologies that can only happen when the planet's consciousness is ready to integrate them. An example of this is free energy, known as zero-point energy, which exploits the fine substance that exists around us and transforms it into usable energy. This would provide us with an unlimited energy source and would virtually eliminate all poverty on the planet. The properties of space were postulated by many. We find them in ancient Vedic philosophy, the Eastern mysteries, various ancient civilizations of the history of mankind, to Descartes, Einstein, Newton, and many others. People are curious beings, and our quest for discover what is will never end. Lost secrets. After Nikola Tesla died, there was a scramble by the United States government to find all his papers, notes, and research before other foreign powers could find them. Tesla's nephew, Sava Kosanovic, reported someone had obviously gone through Tesla's belongings and took an unknown number of personal notes and papers. It was known by the FBI that German intelligence had already spirited away a sizable amount of Tesla's research several years before his death. The stolen material, it is thought, would eventually result in the development of the Nazi flying saucer. The United States made sure that this would not happen again. Anything even remotely associated with the great scientist was quickly confiscated and lost within the secret networks of the pre-World War II America. Nevertheless, more than a dozen boxes of Tesla's belongings left behind at hotels like the Waldorf Astoria, the Governor Clinton Hotel, and the St. Regis had already been sold to salvagers to pay off Tesla's outstanding bills. Most of these boxes and secrets they contained have never been found. Later in life, Tesla made claims concerning a teleforce weapon after studying the Van der Graaf generator. The press referred to it as a peace ray or a death ray. Tesla described the weapon as capable of being used against ground-based infantry for anti-aircraft purposes. Tesla gives the following description concerning the particle gun's operation. The nozzle would send concentrated beams of particles through the free air, such tremendous energy that they will bring down a fleet of 10,000 enemy airplanes at a distance of 200 miles from a defending nation's border and will cause armies to drop dead in their tracks. End quote. Tesla's teleforce weapons, components, and methods included: 1. An apparatus for producing energy in the free air instead of in the high vacuum as in the past. 2. Mechanisms for generating a tremendous electrical force. 3. A means of intensifying and amplifying the force developed by a second mechanism. 4. A gun for producing tremendous electrical repelling force. Tesla claimed to have worked on plans for a directed energy weapon from the early 1900s. He died. In 1937, at a luncheon in his honor concerning the death ray, Tesla stated, "But it is not an experiment. I have built, demonstrated, and used it. Only a little time will pass before I can give it to the world." His records indicated that the device is based on a narrow stream of small tungsten pellets that are accelerated via high voltage, similar to his magnifying transformer. Tesla wrote a treatise, A New Art of Projecting Concentrated Dispersive Energy Through the Natural Media, concerning charged particle beam weapons. Tesla naively hoped that his superweapon would put an end to all war. This treatise is currently in the Nikola Tesla Museum, archived in Belgrade. It describes an open-ended vacuum tube with a gas jet seal that allows particles to exit, a method of charging particles to millions of volts, and a method of creating and directing non-dispersive particle streams through electrostatic repulsion. Tesla tried to interest the U.S. War Department, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, and Yugoslavia in the device. Tesla said that attempts were made to steal his invention, but the spies left empty-handed, since the design for the Teleforce weapon was only contained in his head. Tesla Lost Journals revealed that while he was in Colorado Springs in 1899, he had intercepted communications from extraterrestrial beings who were secretly controlling mankind. These creatures were slowly preparing humans for eventual conquest and domination, using a program that they had been in place since the creation of humankind, but was now accelerating due to the increase of scientific awareness on the Earth. Tesla described his years of research to interpret the strange radio signals and how he attempted to inform the government and military concerning what he had learned, but his letters apparently went unanswered. Tesla spoke in confidence to several of his benefactors, including Colonel John Jacob Astor, who owned the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. These benefactors listened to Tesla and secretly funded what was to be the start of mankind's first battle to regain control of its own destiny, a battle set in motion by Tesla. Unfortunately, Tesla's financier, John Jacob Astor, was drowned with the Titanic. When Tesla died, the government took all his papers and classified them. They did return most of those papers to Tesla's country of birth, but the U.S. government withheld some of those papers to hide certain technology from the public. Number 10. Tesla Scalar Weapons of Mass Destruction. In 1952, Tesla's remaining papers and possessions were released to Sava Kasanovic and returned to Belgrade, Yugoslavia, where a museum was created in the inventor's honor. For many years under Tito's communist regime, it was extremely difficult for Western journalists and scholars to gain access to the Tesla archive in Yugoslavia. Even when they could see only selected papers, this was not the case for Soviet scientists who came in delegations during the 1950s. Concerns increased in 1960 when Soviet Premier Khrushchev announced to the Supreme Soviet that a new and fantastic weapon was in the hatching stage. Quote, "Mankind must put an end to war. A war will put an end to mankind. War will exist until that distant day when the conscientious objector enjoys the same reputation and prestige that the warrior does today. Never have the nations of the world had so much to lose, or so much to gain. Together we shall save our planet, or together we shall perish in its flames." John Fitzgerald Kennedy. End quote. Despite President Kennedy's warning, the superpowers continued to develop countless weapons of mass destruction during the Cold War and employed Tesla's discoveries, which were planned to improve the lives of people, not to destroy mankind. The Soviet Union used Tesla's design and documents to create superweapons. As soon as his new superweapons were deployed and ready, Khrushchev did something dramatic to compensate for his loss of face in 1961 when he had to withdraw Soviet missiles from Cuba. The USS Thresher SSN 593 was the most advanced attack submarine of its time. It was faster and quieter than any submarine ever built and able to dive deeper than any submarine in the world. SSN 593 was discovered the most advanced weapons system of its day, created specifically to seek out and destroy Soviet submarines. SSN 593 Its new sonar, and both passive and active, could detect other submarines and ships at greater range, and it was intended to launch the U.S. Navy's newest anti-submarine missile, Sub-ROC, SUBROC. On April 10, 1963, the Soviets destroyed the USS Thresher with one of their new weapons. Scalar EM electrogravitational beams focused through the ocean to interfere on the Thresher under the surface, recreated spurious EM energy in the sub's electrical control circuits, jamming them so that the sub lost control, sank to crush depth, and imploded. The U.S. nuclear-powered submarine Thresher sank 220 miles east of Boston. All 129 men were lost. These were the scalar beam weapons invented in 1904 by Nikola Tesla. Since he died in 1943, many nations have secretly developed his beam weapons, which are now further developed and more devastating. Using a satellite, one can cause a nuclear-like destruction, earthquake, hurricane, tidal wave, cause instant freezing, killing every living thing instantly over many miles, causing intense heat, like a burning fireball over a wide area, and induced hypnotic mind control over a whole population, or remotely read anybody's mind on the planet. The human cerebral cortex is a natural scalar interferometer. The human cerebral cortex is a natural scalar interferometer. It is a virtual state tuner, processor, and transmitter receiver. It also can produce and control, to some extent, phase conjugate energy and phase conjugate waves. It can also be used to affect anybody's REM dream sleep by sending a subliminal pictures to the visual cortex, cause hallucinogen-like drug effects or symptoms of chemical or biological poisoning, cause a disease epidemic by imprinting the disease signature right into the cellular structure, paralyze and or kill everyone instantaneously in a 50-mile radius without any detectable warning. These weapons do this by crossing two or more beams with each other, and any target can be aimed at, even right through to the opposite side of the Earth. The Central Intelligence Agency MK-Ultra Subproject 19 researched the electronic control of human behavior. Subproject 119 had the purpose to provide funds for a study to make a critical review of the literature and scientific developments related to the recording, analysis, and interpretation of bioelectric signals from the human organism and activation of the human behavior by remote means. The survey encompassed 5 main areas: techniques of activation of the human organism by remote electronic means, bioelectric sensors, recording, analysis, and standardization of data. In 1973, with the government-wide panic caused by Watergate, the CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all MK-Ultra files destroyed. Pursuant to this order, most CIA documents regarding the project were destroyed. making a full investigation of MK Ultra impossible. This is the same agency that stated that weapons of mass destruction and Al-Qaeda were in Iraq. A cache of some 20,000 documents survived Helm's purge, as they had been incorrectly stored in a financial records building and were discovered following a FOIA request in 1977. These documents were fully investigated during the Senate hearings of 1977. Scalar potential interferometry. How does it work? Interference is what happens when two waves carrying energy meet up and overlap. The energy they carry mixed up together, so instead of two waves, you get a third wave whose shape and size depends on the pattern of the original two waves. When the waves combine like this, the process is called superposition. Constructive interference means combining two or more waves to get a third wave that's bigger. The new wave has the same frequency and the frequency but more amplitude or higher peaks. Destructive interference means waves subtracting and canceling out. The peaks in one wave are canceled by the troughs in other. An interferometer is really a precise scientific instrument designed to measure things with extraordinary accuracy. A basic idea of interferometry involves taking a beam of light or another type of electromagnetic radiation and splitting it into two equal halves using what's called a beam splitter, also called a half-transparent mirror or half-mirror. This is simply a piece of glass whose surface is very thinly coated with silver. As you shine the light at it, half the light passes straight through and half of it reflects back. So the beam splitter is like a cross between an ordinary piece of glass and a mirror. One of the beams, known as the reference beam, shines onto a mirror and from there to a screen, camera, or other detector. The other beam shines at or through something you want to measure onto a second mirror, back through the beam splitter, and onto the same screen. This second beam travels an extra distance, or in some other slightly different way, to the first beam, so it gets slightly out of step, or out of phase. When the two light beams meet at the screen, they overlap and interfere, and the phase difference between them creates a pattern of light and dark areas. In other words, a set of interference fringes. The light areas are placed where the two beams have added together constructively and become brighter. The dark areas are places where the beams have subtracted from one another destructively. The exact pattern of interference depends on the difference way or the extra distance that one of the beams has traveled. By inspecting and measuring the fringes, you can calculate this with great accuracy, and that gives you an exact measurement of whatever it is you're trying to find. The scalar wave is a purported type of electromagnetic wave that works outside physics as we know it. Scalar interferometry. The real scientific nomenclature for this weapon is longitudinal EM wave interferometer. Because of its uneloquent name, mainstream media has dubbed it a scalar weapon. The scalar interferometry weapon is designed to create electromagnetic fields at a distance. The research started in the 1930s by Nobel Prize winner Tesla. He announced the possibility of a weapon that could destroy hundreds of aircraft hundreds of miles away. He came up with this idea half a century before its time. Thus, Tesla was regarded as a mad scientist. He died in 1943 without ever revealing the secret of these great weapons. But he was on to something. Research that was not resumed until late 20th century. By using longitudinal waves, energy is triggered to emerge from the local vacuum at the point of the target. Thus, a modest triggering signal can cause a huge effect from a distance. This weapon would not have visible light, as most people imagine from movies such as Star Wars. Sorry, it would not have visible light, as most people imagine from movies such as Star Wars. Instead, it uses high-powered microwaves and other sorts of radiation. Though usually deadly to humans, the idea behind these weapons is not to kill, but rather to disrupt electronic systems of enemies. Before the turn of the century, Nikola Tesla had discovered and was utilizing a new type of electric wave. Tesla repeatedly stated his waves were non-Hertzian, and his wireless transmission did not fall off as the square of the distance. His discovery challenged conventional physics theories and the dominant technologies. It was responsible for the withdrawal of his financial backing, his deliberate isolation from the scientific community, and the gradual removal of his name from the history books. By 1981, the Soviet Union had discovered and weaponized the Tesla scalar wave effects. Though there are several Tesla devices of note, the most powerful of these frightening weapons was Tesla howitzer. It was completed at the Scharskin-Huygens missile range and presently considered to be either a high-energy laser or a particle beam weapon. Britain, China, Russia, and the United States head up the research in this field, with the United States currently being slightly behind the race. The central concept is that scalar waves restore certain useful aspects of Maxwell's equations. The scientific evolution of classical electrodynamics was flawed due to the omissions in the 19th century by Heaviside, Hertz, and Gibbs. Russian energetics scientists corrected the electromagnetic models and went to develop the classified unified field theory. This led to the development of powerful scalar interferometer superweapons. According to Thomas Bearden, the scalar interferometer is a powerful superweapon that the Soviet Union used for years to modify weather in the rest of the world. It taps the quantum vacuum energy using a method discovered by T. Henry Moray in the 1920s. The weapon completed at the Russian Sharshkagan missile range is a huge Tesla scalar interferometer with 4 modes of operation. 3 of the modes are very hard to find any information on at all. However, the one utilized is called the Tesla shield. It places a thin, impenetrable hemisphere shell of energy over a large defended area. The 3-dimensional shell is created by interfering 2 Fourier expansion 3-dimensional scalar hemispherical patterns in space so they pair couple into a dome-like shell of intense, ordinary electromagnetic energy. The air molecules and atoms in the shell are totally ionized and thus highly excited, giving off intense glowing light. Anything physical which hits the shell receives an enormous discharge of electrical energies and instantly vaporized. If several of these hemispherical shells are concentrically stacked, even the gamma radiation and electromagnetic pulse from a high-altitude nuclear explosion above the stack cannot penetrate all the shells due to repetitive absorption and re-radiation and scattering in the layered plasmas. The altitude of the EMP created by a nuclear blast determines the area where all non-protected electronic devices are disrupted or destroyed. In the 1960s to 80s, in the USSR, there was fulfilled a great number of satellite killer tests. During this warfare, there were launched land ballistic missiles, anti-missiles, and military satellites, including counter weapons, and it made a great impression on the USA. This warfare of the Soviet nuclear force was called 7 Hours Nuclear War. It forced America to start creation of anti-satellite and anti-missile systems of new generation. Star Wars program, the Strategic Defense Initiative proclaimed by Ronald Reagan of 1983. Reagan discussing the Strategic Defense Initiative on a national address on 23 March 1983 called, "Upon the Scientific Community in Our Country, those who gave us nuclear weapons to turn their great talents now to the cause of mankind and world peace to give us the means of rendering those nuclear weapons impotent and obsolete." Depicted is the Soviet NPO Energia, a military missile station equipped with a laser and missile weapons. Based on NPO Energia, there were developed 2 weapons systems. 17 F-19 Skiff applying laser weapons and 17 F-111 Cascade, a system applying missile weapons. In 1979, the Soviet Union added a list of some new types of potential weapons of mass destruction. 1. Radiological weapons using radioactive materials, which could produce harmful effects similar to those of nuclear explosion. Particle beam weapons based on charged or nuclear or neutral particles to affect biological targets. 3. Infrasonic acoustic radiation weapons. 4. Electromagnetic weapons operating at certain radio frequency radiations which could have injurious effects on human organs. In response to the Soviet developments, the U.S. and other Western nations delayed. Directed energy weapons take the form of lasers, high-powered microwaves, and particle beams. Their adoption for ground, air, sea, and space warfare depends not only on using electromagnetic spectrum, but also upon favorable political and budgetary support. An article entitled "Non-Lethal Weapons May Violate Treaties," the author notes that the Certain Conventional Weapons Convention covers many of the non-conventional weapons, those that utilize infrasound or electromagnetic energy, including lasers, microwave, or radio frequency radiation, or visible light pulsed at brainwave frequency for their effects. Quote, Harlan Gerard, managing director of the International Committee Against Offensive Microwave Weapons, told me he believes the strategy behind the government's recent push for less than lethal weapons is a subterfuge. The ones that are now getting all the publicity are put up for scrutiny to get the public's approval. Electromagnetic mind-altering technologies are not mentioned, but would be brought in later under the umbrella of less than lethal weapons. These weapons were recently transferred from the Department of Defense over to the Department of Justice. Why? Because there are several international treaties that specifically limit or exclude weapons of this nature from being used in international warfare. In other words, weapons that are barred from the use against our country's worst enemies, notwithstanding the fact that the U.S. did use these weapons against Iraqi troops, can now be used against our own citizens by the local police departments against such groups as peaceful protests of the U.S. nuclear policies. End quote. The March 23, 1991 news brief. High-tech psychological warfare arrives in the Middle East, describes a U.S. psychological operations, or PSYOPs, tactic directed against Iraqi troops in Kuwait during Operation Desert Storm. The maneuver consists of a system in which subliminal mind-altering technology was carried on standard radio frequency broadcasts. The March 26, 1991 news brief states that among the standard military planning groups in the Center of U.S. War Planning Operations at Riyadh was an unbelievable and highly classified PSYOPs program utilizing silent sound technologies. The opportunity to use this method occurred when Saddam Hussein's military command and control system was destroyed. The Iraqi troops were then forced to use commercial FM radio stations to carry encoded commands which were broadcast on the 100 megahertz frequency. The U.S. PSYOPs team set up its own portable FM transmitter utilizing the same frequency in the deserted city of Al-Kahif. This U.S. transmitter overpowered the local Iraqi station. Along with patriotic and religious music, PSYOPs transmitted vague, confusing, and contradictory military orders and information. Subliminally, a much more powerful technology was at work. A sophisticated electronic system to speak directly to the mind of a listener, to alter and entrain his brain waves, to manipulate his brain electroencephalographic EEG patterns, and artificially implant negative emotional states, feelings of fear, anxiety, despair, and hopelessness. This subliminal system doesn't just tell a person to feel an emotion, it makes them feel it. It implants that emotion in their minds. This application of electromagnetics as a mind-altering mechanism is based on subliminal carrier technology. The silent sound spread spectrum, the SSSS, sometimes called S-Squad or Squad. It was developed by Dr. Oliver Lowery of Norcross, Georgia, and is described in U.S. Patent number 5159703. Silent Subliminal Presentation System, dated October 27, 1992. The abstract for the patent reads, a silent communication system in which non-aural carriers in the very low or very high audio frequency range or in the adjacent ultrasonic frequency spectrum are amplitude or frequency modulated with the desired intelligence and propagated acoustically or vibrationally for inducement into the brain, typically through the use of loudspeakers, earphones, or piezoelectric transducers. The modulated carriers may be transmitted directly in real time or may be conveniently recorded and stored on mechanical, magnetic, or optical media for delayed or repeated transmission to the listener. According to the literature by Silent Sounds Incorporated, it is now possible using supercomputers to analyze human emotional EEG patterns and replicate them, then store these emotional signature clusters on another computer at will, silently induce and change the emotional state in a human being. Silent Sounds Incorporate states that its interest only in positive emotions, but the military is not so constrained. It's obvious that this is a U.S. Department of Defense project. Edward Tilton, president of Silent Sounds Incorporated, describes S-Squad in a letter dated December 13, 1996. All schematics, however, have been classified by the U.S. government and are not allowed to reveal the exact details. We make tapes and CDs for the German government, even the former Soviet Union countries, all with the permissions of the U.S. State Department, of course. The system was used throughout Operation Desert Storm Iraq quite successfully. The graphic illustration induced alpha to theta biofeedback cluster movement, which accompanies the literature, is labeled AB 116394-95 unclassified, which is an output from the world's most versatile and most sensitive electroencephalograph EEG machine. It has a gain capability of 200,000 and compared to other EEG machines is in use which have gain capability of approximately 50,000. It is software driven by fastest of computers, using a noise nulling technology similar to that used by nuclear submarines for detecting small objects underwater at extreme range. The purpose of all this high technology is to plot and display a moving cluster of periodic brainwave signals. The illustration shows an EEG display from a single individual taken of left and right hemispheres simultaneously. The readout from the two sides of the brain appear to be quite different, but in fact are the same, discounting normal left-right brain variations. Dr. Michael Persinger is a professor of psychology and neuroscience at Laurentian University, Ontario, Canada. Strong electromagnetic fields can affect a person's brain. Temporal lobe stimulation, Persinger said, can evoke the feeling of presence, disorientation, and perceptual irregularities, and can activate images stored in the subject's memories, and including nightmares and monsters that are normally suppressed. Dr. Persinger wrote an article a few years ago titled On the Possibility of Directly Assessing Every Human Brain by Electromagnetic Induction of Fundamental Algorithms. This abstract reads, contemporary neuroscience suggests the evidence of fundamental algorithms by which all sensory transduction is translated into the intrinsic brain-specific code. Direct stimulation of these codes within the human temporal or limbic cortices by applied electromagnetic patterns may require energy levels which are within the range of both geomagnetic activity and contemporary communication networks. A process which, coupled to the narrow band of brain temperature, could allow all normal human brains to be affected by a subharmonic whose frequency range at about 10 Hz would only vary by 0.1 Hz. Within the last 2 decades, a potential has emerged which was improbable, but which is now marginally feasible. This potential is the technical capability to influence directly the major portion of the approximately 6 billion brains of the human species, without mediation through classical sensory modalities, by generating neural information within a physical medium within which all members of species are immersed. The historical emergence of such possibilities, which have ranged from gunpowder to atomic fission, have resulted in major changes in the social evolution that occurred inordinately quickly after the implementation reduction of the risk of the inappropriate application of these technologies requires the continued and open discussion of their realistic feasibility and implications within the scientific and public domain. It doesn't get any plainer than that. And we do not have an open discussion because the U.S. government has totally denied the existence of this technology. A more detailed report on mind control techniques used by electromagnetic spectrum will be subject of future book by this author. He references a website, http://www.theforbiddenknowledge.com/hardtruth/mind_sounds.htm. The Soviets in 1985 once threatened the Earth itself by activating their scalar weapons with multiple scalar transmitters turned on at once, endangering the survival of the entire planet. Per nuclear physicist Thomas Bearden, they conducted a massive full-up scalar weapon system and communication strategic exercise. During these exercises, American Frank Golden discovered that the Russians had activated 27 gigantic power taps. These were established by resonating the Earth electrogravitationally on 54 powerful scalar frequencies. 27 pairs where the two and are separated from each other by 12 kilohertz, transmitted into the Earth. The Soviets utilized this to stimulate the Earth into forced electrogravitational resonance on all 54 frequencies. Each of the 27 power taps extracted enormous energy from the molten core of itself, and tuning it into ordinary electrical power. Each giant tap was capable of powering 4 to 6 of the largest scalar EM howitzers possessed by Russia. Bearden wrote, quote, apparently over 100 giant scalar EM weapons were activated and a large number of command and control transmissions, and it lasted several days. By alternating the potentials and loads of each of the two paired transmitters, electrical energy in enormous amounts can be extracted from the Earth itself, fed by the giant cathode that is the Earth's molten core. Scalar EM command and control systems, including high data rate communications with underwater submarines, were also activated on a massive scale. The exercise went on for several days as power taps were switched in and out, and command and control systems went up and down. Bearden claims not one American intelligence lab or scientist detected this, as they didn't have a detector for scalar EM radiation, and that not one officially believes that the exercise ever happened. However, it was monitored on an advanced proprietary detection system by Frank Golden for several days and by Bearden for several hours. He references a website, http://www.angelfire.com/cv/scalarweapons.html. In a conflicting official declassified Navy report, 50 years of steely purpose USS Thresher remembered, navc.navy.mil. 10 April 2013. The disaster was blamed on a 1-inch hole in a pipe. The official Navy Court of Inquiry concluded that the Thresher had probably suffered the failure of a saltwater piping system joint, which relied heavily on silver brazing instead of welding. Earlier tests using ultrasound equipment found potential problems with about 14% of the tested brazed joints, most of which were determined not to pose a risk significant enough to require a repair. High-pressure water spraying from a broken pipe joint may have shorted out one of the main electrical panels, causing a shutdown, scram, of the reactor with a subsequent loss of propulsion. Contrary to the Court of Inquiry report, spurious electromagnetic splatter surrounding the immediate vicinity of the targeted area left a signature of intense EM interference with multiple systems and multiple frequencies of the USS Skylark, surface companion of the Thresher. This anomalous EM interference was so virulent that it required over 1.5 hours for the Skylark to transmit an emergency message back to headquarters that the sub had been lost. The death of the Thresher was Khrushchev's first blow. Some electronic systems mysteriously malfunctioned, then later completely recovered spontaneously. This again is clearly a scalar EM weapon signature. The Soviets demonstrated their destructive method of obtaining tremendous electromagnetic energy from the molten core of the Earth, which power to gigantic strategic scalar Tesla howitzers. Per Tom Bearden, the Soviet Union had weaponized the Tesla scalar wave effects by 1981. The most powerful of these devastating Tesla weapons, which Brezhnev undoubtedly was referring to in 1975 when the Soviet side at the SALT talks, suddenly suggesting limiting the development of new weapons, more frightening than the mind of man had imagined. As measured by Golden, two signals are continually transmitted into the Earth some 12 kilohertz apart, and the Earth itself is placed in scalar resonance to the two frequencies. The core of the Earth, being a pumped phase conjugate mirror, responds by generating highly amplified phase conjugate replicas, which return and concentrate all their energy at the transmitter receivers. The receivers receive the enormous beat frequency 12 kilohertz energy, using it for power. One then has a kind of scalar interferometer channel in the Earth's core in the endothermic mode. Depending upon the biasing, either ordinary EM energy or negative EM energy is captured in the 12 kilohertz band by the interferometer receivers. Varying the negative biasing also provides a throttle to control the amount of energy extracted. One of these weapons is Tesla howitzer, recently completed at the Sarashagan missile range, and presently considered to be either a high-energy laser or a particle beam weapon. See Aviation Week in Space Technology, July 28, 1980, page 48 for an artist's conception. The Sarashagan's howitzer is a huge Tesla scalar interferometer with 4 modes of operation. One continuous mode is a Tesla shield, which places a thin, impenetrable, hemispherical shell of energy over a large defended area. The three-dimensional shell is created by interfering two Fourier expansion, three-dimensional scalar hemispherical patterns in space, so they pair couple into a dome-like shell of intense ordinary electromagnetic energy. The air molecules and atoms in the shell are totally ionized and thus highly excited, giving off intense glowing light. Anything physical which hits the shell receives an enormous discharge of electrical energy and is instantly vaporized. It goes pfft, like a bug hitting one of the electrical bug killers now so much in vogue. Several of these hemispherical shells are concentrically stacked, even in the gamma radiation and EMP from a high-altitude nuclear explosion above the stack cannot penetrate all the shells due to repetitive absorption and re-radiation and scattering in the layered plasmas. In the continuous shield mode, the Tesla's interferometer is fed by a bank of Murray-free energy generators, so that enormous energy is available in the shield. Work on beam weapons also continued in the United States. In 1958, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, initiated a top-secret project codenamed Seesaw at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory to develop a charged particle beam weapon. More than 10 years and $27 million later, the project was abandoned because of the project's high costs associated with implementation, as well as the formidable technical problems associated with propagating a beam through very long ranges in the atmosphere. Scientists associated with the project had no knowledge of Tesla's papers. In the late 1970s, there was fear that the Soviets may have achieved a technological breakthrough. Some U.S. defense analysis concluded that a large beam weapon facility was under construction near the Sino-Soviet border in southern Russia. The American response to this technological surprise was the Strategic Defense Initiative announced by President Ronald Reagan in 1983. Teams of government scientists were urged to turn their great talents now to the cause of mankind and world peace to give us the means of rendering these nuclear weapons impotent and obsolete. Lockheed Martin is already using what is probably a Tesla-related invention. They claim it is proprietary. To wirelessly transfer 40 watts of energy from ground to drones via lasers, enabling them to stay in the air possibly indefinitely. The drone's flight is controlled by an Xbox 360 pad. Reference in the lie/Wired, July 13th, 2012. An application of Tesla's dream to positively benefit humanity is supplying the world with clean wireless electrical power. An international group out of Russia has launched another fundraiser to go the step of reproducing Tesla's dream to power the world wirelessly anywhere, the source of which can be clean. PESN, June 8, 2015. Intel, the world's largest chip manufacturer, has corroborated the experiments of Dr. Konstantin Mail by demonstrating a form of wireless energy transfer by lighting a 60-watt bulb from a power source 3 feet away in an effect they referred to as WREL, W-R-E-L, Wireless Resonant Energy Link. The Nevada Lightning Lab has produced a research facility for generating controlled lightning discharges using a matched set of 12-story Tesla coil towers with discharges over 300 feet in length, delivering a peak output of over 18 million volts. Located 35 miles outside of Las Vegas, Nevada, this facility will support new industrial and scientific research. The 1/12 scale model twin tower prototypes are completed in San Francisco, California. Slashdot, December 10th, 2008. Free energy devices were proposed by Dr. Holm Hummler at 2004 GWUP conference in Würzburg. Chapter 11. Dr. Konstantin Mail and the discovery of the magnetic scalar wave. Professor Konstantin Mail detected the magnetic scalar wave roughly 100 years ago. Nikola Tesla had detected the electrical scalar wave. However, this knowledge is suppressed today because it is linked to free energy, which threatens existing energy enterprises. Neutrinos speeding quicker than light are an aspect of scalar waves, which can be harvested for free by galaxies, stars, planets, humans, etc., giving evidence that all of them are living entities. In this third interview for White TV, Professor Mail gives vital information for physicists, astronomers, astrologers, geologists, and free energy researchers on how the universe is built up with neutrinos and how to catch them. In 2006, Mail could predict an earthquake in connection with a solar eclipse because he knew about the moon's ability to focus neutrinos. Mail had described why Kepler's law is not appropriate to describe the movements of stars in a galaxy and why dark matter and string theories are useless nonsense. Professor Mail's field theory is non-speculative and enables new interpretations of several principles of electrical engineering and quantum physics. This leads to feasible interpretations of experimental observations, which to this day have not been possible to explain via existing theories. For example, quantum particle characteristics can be calculated when interpreted as a vortex. The dielectric loss of a capacitor emerges as a vortex loss. Likewise, many neutrino experimental results can be explained when the neutrinos are regarded as a vortex. Neutrino power is available as an inexhaustible form of energy due to a remarkable over-unity effect. In consideration of environmental sustainability, significant improvements can result by means of this revised theory regarding today's electromagnetic pollution. Mail's theory is based on an extension of Maxwell's theory and as such is a special case scenario which does not affect classical physical laws which remain in force. Just as with the spiritual laws, the commandments in Matthew 5:17, Jesus assures us that he did not come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. In the physical world of electromagnetics, Tesla, Mail, and Bearden are fulfilling the electromagnetic laws of Maxwell by incorporating the magnetic flux corrections. In 5:19, Jesus exhorts us to not only obey the law, but we are to teach it also. We must teach these spiritual and scientific truths and continue to evolve as humans in knowledge and love for one another to survive as a species. In Mail's enhancement view of the potential vortex, the physical comprehension becomes more objective. Just as Einstein's theory, the Mail theory explains not only interactions but temperature, which cannot be explained today using conventional theories. Tesla and Mail have advanced scientific knowledge beyond orthodox scientific knowledge despite the opposition of the scientific Pharisees of our current age. Change is the end result of all true learning, quote by Leo Buscaglia. Professor Mail has written numerous books. His lectures at the Technical University of Berlin, University of Clausthal, and University of Applied Sciences Furtwangen. In his end-of-week seminars, it is possible to become familiar with the potential vortex, the objective vortex theory, and to converse with Professor Mail. The current dates are available on his website. For in-depth information, please refer to Professor Mail's professional articles and recitations. Available for purchase on this website are books, videos, and remarkable proof of concept transmission kit. The term transponder consists of the terms transmitter and responder, describes thus radio devices which receive incoming signals to redirect or answer to them. First, there were only active transponders, which require a power supply from outside. For some time, passive systems were developed in addition, whose receiver gets the necessary energy at the same time, conveyed by the transmitter wirelessly. After the state of art, several high-frequency channels are necessary around the two parts of a transponder system to couple with one another. The transfer of energy from the fundamental unit to the transceiver takes place with a low frequency to obtain a consequence of high wavelength, the largest range as possible. The data flow in opposite direction, however, takes place with high frequencies, which usually already lie in the range of cellular phone network. Additionally, if data is to be conveyed from the fundamental unit to the transceiver, then a third channel from its own transmitter and receiver is necessary. The enormous expenditure can be reduced to only one channel with substantially larger range. Operation of base on the extended field theory formulated by Mail. Two co-workers of Mail's Institute, the Transfer Center for Scalar Wave Technology, www.etzs.de, demonstrated in 2003 at Congress and Technology Park of Villingen, Schwingen, for the first time publicly using the ISM frequency of 6.78 MHz, a scalar wave transponder functionality, consisting of a bidirectional LAN connection to exchange data between two PCs, demonstrating the transfer of energy for passive interface map over a distance of 30 meters. In his books, Professor Dr. Ing. Constantine Mail develops a self-consistent field theory which is used to derive at all known interactions of the potential vortex. Instead of the normally used Maxwell equation, Professor Mail chooses Faraday's law of induction as a hypothetical factor and proves that the electric vortex is part thereof. This potential vortex propagates scalar-like through space and is a longitudinal electric wave whose properties have already been established by a century ago by Nikola Tesla. Quote, the field equations according to Maxwell do not describe potential vortices in the dielectrics such as vortex losses and capacitors. But this was yesterday. period. Since Science and Nature have reported in 2009 the development of magnetic monopoles by German Helmholtz Society. Unquote. It is now understood that the third Maxwell equation, div B equals 0, only describes a special case. Mail describes the need to consider the consequences and the impact to what we learned about electrodynamics. Furthermore, the experimental proof of a vortex transmission as a longitudinal wave through air or vacuum, as accomplished by Tesla already 100 years ago, is neither with Maxwell's field theory nor with the currently used quantum field theory explicable or compatible. We are faced with an urgent need for a new field theory. Chapter 12, DNA wave-like and scalar wave biology. Professor Konstantin Mel, the Tesla of 21st century, has extended his scalar wave research to biology. He detected that our whole body works with scalar waves, that the DNA transports information and energy with a magnetic scalar wave, that the nerves transport scalar waves, that the nodes Ranvier detected indicate a standing longitudinal or scalar wave, and that bioresonance and medical applications and homeopathy use scalar waves. Dr. Konstantin Mel has been called the new Tesla of our time in an interview for White TV on 7 May 2012. His comprehensive research on potential vortices, magnetic scalar waves, the unified field theory, and the existence of the aether continues the groundbreaking work that Tesla began more than 100 years ago. In the opinion of the moderator, I believe that Professor D. Konstantin Mel is of our time, Tesla's new super genius. In Mel's first interview for White TV in English, he gave a summary of his whole gigantic research that allowed him to discover that a vortex is always made up of two, the second of which was unknown to science. He has named it the potential vortex. The Male rediscovered scalar waves by demonstrating how Tesla discovered the electric scalar wave. Then Male discovered the magnetic scalar wave, and this is one which is relevant to biology. Our entire human body functions using magnetic scalar waves. Male also formulated the unified field theory, where Einstein failed, and the proof of the existence of the ether. Male detected that our whole body works with scalar waves, that the DNA molecules transports information and energy using magnetic scalar waves. DNA is constructed like an antenna, transfers information and energy with the help of magnetic scalar waves, according to Mel. Depicted in this distribution of the electric field and of the magnetic flux density in the double helix of a DNA molecule, propagation speed of a DNA wave is given by V and is equal to 140,000 kilometers per second. The speed of light is given by C and is equal to 300,000 kilometers per second and is equal to the speed of the vortex, and as determined by the International CCN Society in 2011. Nerve cells transport energy and information using scalar waves. Ranvier detected standing longitudinal waves, or scalar waves, at the nodes of Ranvier named after him. Bioresonance medicine, BICOM devices, and homeopathy uses these waves. Ranvier's noter. This interview is extremely important for doctors because Mel has found the missing links in how the human body functions. But it is also important for teachers to understand why children have ADHD and difficulty in learning. Mel also explains that what electrosmog is and how to eliminate it. Victims of tinnitus and mind control can learn a lot why they are suffering and how they could improve their situation. Victims of tinnitus and mind control can learn a lot from Mel in this interview. He also gives tips about how they can improve their situation. He references a website, https://wordpress.com/2014/05/16/dr-Constantine, spelled KONSTANTINE-the-new-Tesla / Additional information on scalar waves is given on the following websites: Professor Mel New Tesla, Neutrino Free Energy, 100 Years Scalar Wave Conspiracy, Our Body Works with Scalar Waves, Scalar Weapons on 9/11, Tabletop Defender from Q Wave, Shelter for TIs, Technical Proof, Scalar Waves Exist, Scalar Waves Kill Cancer Cells, The Growing Earth Part 1 and Part 2, Big Bang Bluff, Big Bluff, Junk DNA, No Junk at All. While Nikola Tesla was the biggest scientific genius of the 20th century, the continuation of his revolutionary discoveries is today being advanced by Professor Dr. Konstantin Mel from Villingen in the Black Forest of Germany. Mel has not only organized a revival of Tesla, but developed his research to mind-boggling levels. He detected that every vortex has a counterpart, and so-called potential vortex, being able to form matter. He shows that electrons, protons, neutrinos are double vortices without needing a postulate. By that, he proves that there are two more types of waves besides the already well-known electromagnetic waves. Hertz, 1888. Tesla, 1898, detected the electric scalar wave and Mel the magnetic scalar wave, giving access to free energy, huge over unity effects. The magnetic scalar wave is integral to neutrinos and consistently exceeds the speed of light. Essential to Einstein's theory, magnetic scalar waves are used in all biological systems. Mel has explained how DNA performed as antennas can send information and energy using magnetic waves. He has identified in DNA and cell resonance. Magnetic waves enable cell communication exactly how electromagnetic waves allow cells to communicate with each other. He also pointed out how the equations of James Clerk Maxwell omitted the critical scalar wave components, which explain the physical basis of life. Mel describes also what electrosmog is and how we can avoid this. The cell phone industry, the TV, radio, and computer industry, and the car manufacturers could revolutionize their products by using scalar waves instead of electromagnetic waves because they are healthier, use less energy, and have one dimension more to transport information. And finally, Mel discovered unified field theory, which scientists the world over have attempted to do for ages. Einstein himself could not succeed in establishing the unified field theory because he based his theories in the false assumptions that the speed of light cannot be exceeded, which Tesla discovered from his experiments, and Mel has now provided conclusive evidence to the contrary. Konstantin Mel has identified how electromagnetic waves allows cells to DNA generates a longitudinal wave that propagates in the direction of a magnetic field vector. Longitudinal waves are waves in which the displacement of the medium is in the same direction as, or the opposite direction to, the direction of travel of the wave. After Heaviside's attempt to generalize Maxwell's equation, Heaviside concluded that electromagnetic waves were not to be found as longitudinal waves in free space or homogeneous media. But Maxwell's equations do lead to the appearance of longitudinal waves under some circumstances, for example, in plasma waves or guided waves. Distinct from the free space waves, such as those studied by Hertz in his UHF experiments, are xenic waves. Computed frequencies from the structure of DNA agrees with those of the predicted biophoton radiation. The optimization of efficiency by minimizing the conduction losses leads to the double helix structure of DNA. The vortex model of the magnetic scalar wave not only covers many observed structures within the nucleus perfectly, but also explains the hyperboloid channels in the matrix when two cells communicate with each other. Potential vortices are essential component of scalar waves as discovered in 1990. The basic approach for an external field theory was confirmed in 2009 with the discovery of magnetic monopoles. For the first time, this provides the opportunity to explain the physical basis of life, not only from the biological discipline. Nature covers the whole spectrum of known scientific fields of research, and interdisciplinary understanding is required to explain its complex relationships. The characteristics of the potential vortex are significant. With its concentration effect, it provides for miniaturization down to a few nanometers, which allows enormously high information density into the nucleus. With this first introduction of the magnetic scalar waves, it becomes clear that such a wave is suitable to the use genetic code chemically stored in the base pairs of the genes and electrically modulated them to piggyback information from the cell nucleus to another cell. At the receiving end, the reverse processes take place and the transported information is converted back into chemical structure. The necessary energy required to power the chemical processes is provided by the magnetic scalar wave itself. Oersted was aware of moral considerations in science as expressed in his essays and in I Naturen, The Spirit in Nature, with respect to the potentially devastating development of scalar weapons of mass destruction. It is vital for the survivable of the race not only to pursue and continue to develop technologies for betterment of humankind. Chapter 13, The Spiritual and the Physical. In the thesis, The Spiritual into the Physical, he showed how the physical itself is the ephemeral and changeable, while the essence of it is the laws of govern all its effects. When we, by thinking to be able to discover many of these laws, they could also be called common sense laws or natural thoughts. They are not only our thinking, but they are also the acting forces of the reality of nature. The whole of existence is accordingly a rich national work and revelation of living omniscience of the Godhead. The first gulp from the glass of the natural sciences will turn you into an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. Quote by Werner Heisenberg. The universality of natural laws. Other papers in the spirit of nature showed how Oersted the fundamental abilities of the soul must be essentially the same everywhere in life. A resident on Jupiter must come to the same conception of nature as an inhabitant of Earth. Also, the laws of beauty and morality must essentially be the same throughout the universe. Oersted did not divorce the basic tenets of ethics and his philosophy of religion in his scientific studies. He reminded us that it is our ethical task to bed our will and our lives in harmony with eternal reason. He ascribes to man a limited freedom, but he did not believe that God did not ever need to intervene arbitrarily into the course of the world. After a careful investigation of the weaknesses of unbelief and superstition, Oersted made the following splendid summary. Quote, unbelief consists in a tendency to reject that which people are accustomed to assume about spiritual things as far as one arrived at faith by immediate inner sense and did not prove it by thought. It is raised because of the numerous instances in which scientific discoveries reject the opinions one had assumed without investigation. Conclusion. To fail to harness scalar wave technology for the benefit of mankind would be tragic. Our civilization is facing adversity in countless forms. Hunger, disease, pollution, poverty, and war threaten our future and the future of our children. Scalar waves exist, they are useful, and the information to build devices that generate and receive them is available to everyone. To better understand our universe, to ensure the continuation of our civilization, and to honor Nikola Tesla, we should do our best to support the open sourcing of this technology. Quote, the multitude exerts a depressing influence today in science as it did 5 centuries ago in the church. but there always will be individuals of high aims and endowed by a kind of nature with gifts non-conforming to the mean. It is to such individuals that the purely scientific work will prove enticing, while the great multitude will in science only see the modern ladder to position and wealth. These foolish individuals will be happy if they obtain an opportunity to devote all their energies to the establishment of fundamental constraints of nature. Gustavus Detlef Hinrichs, end quote. The promotion of individuals of high aims to leadership positions and not political and business leaders who only seek power and wealth at the expense of humankind should be the highest priority in assuring the survival of the human race. All institutions, government, business, and academic, etc., must support this objective. We also need to critically examine electromagnetic theory and give credit to Dr. Constantine Mail's conclusion that many neutrino experimental results can be explained when the neutrinos are regarded as a vortex. Neutrino power is available as an inexhaustible form of energy due to a remarkable over-unity effect. In consideration of environmental sustainability, significant advances can also result by means of Mail's revised theory regarding electromagnetic pollution. Critical examination of the research of Bearden and Sweet and heeding their warnings that 4 nations of the world are already embarked on weaponization of scalar EM unified field theory. It is sobering to think that in addition to having the ability to make our planet a paradise for humankind, we also can make it into a hell. Humankind does not have to allow scalar EM unified field theory to be used to destroy the planet and its citizens. We must not allow scalar technology to repeat the horrible mistakes made with proliferating nuclear energy and encouraging psychopathic warmongers to wage war on God's creations. Heeding John F. Kennedy's words and working to abolish weapons of mass destruction must be our highest calling. Every inhabitant of this planet must contemplate the day when this planet may no longer be habitable. Every man, woman, and child lives under a nuclear sword of Damocles, hanging by the slenderest of threads, capable of being cut at any moment by accident or miscalculation or by madness. The weapons of war must be abolished before they abolish us. John F. Kennedy, Address to the United Nations General Assembly, 25th September, 1961. On U.S. Department of State's website. Humankind must seize upon the positive aspects of EM technology and develop and apply this technology for betterment of all people everywhere. Herbert Hoover once admonished us regarding the employment of nuclear weapons of mass destruction. The use of the atomic bomb with its indiscriminate killing of women and children revolts my soul. Today, we must be just as repulsed and forcibly reject the further development of EM weapons. Letter, August 8, 1945, to Colonel John Callan O'Laughlin, publisher of Army and Navy Journal, as quoted in Gar Alperovitz. The Decision to Use the Atomic Bomb, 1996. Curriculum in schools and universities must be revised to include the omitted magnetic flux and monopole discoveries, which will permit progress in understanding unified gravitational and electromagnetic field theory. Long ago, Albert Einstein said words. It would, of course, be a great step forward if we succeed in combining the gravitational field and the electromagnetic field into a single structure. Only so could the era in theoretical physics inaugurated by Faraday and Clerk Maxwell be brought to a satisfactory close. As Teilhard de Chardin wrote, "Someday, after we have mastered the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. Educating our citizens about the universal concept of love for another and our Creator should be our ultimate concern regarding research and implementing scientific knowledge for the benefits of all humanity. Judicious pursuit of scientific knowledge which improves people's lives must be our overarching objective. It is necessary to forbid or limit certain scientific pursuits, DNA and GMO manipulation, scalar wave weaponry development, and mind control. Science and the economies of the world should be employed to serve humankind, not enslave and diminish people's happiness and freedom. Scientists, therefore, are responsible for their research not only intellectually but also morally. This responsibility has become an important issue in many of today's sciences, but especially so in physics, in which the results of quantum mechanics and relativity theory have opened up to very different paths for physicists to pursue. They may lead us to put in the extreme terms, to the Buddha or to the bomb, and it is up to each of us to decide which path to take. Fritjof Capra, In the Turning Point, Science, Society, and the Rising Culture, 1983. 87. Lise Meitner, wife and major contributor to the work of Albert Einstein, was one of the few scientists who courageously opposed the development of the atomic bomb on moral grounds. In response to her invitation in 1943 to work with Otto Robert Frisch and some British scientists at Los Alamos during the Manhattan Project, she stated, "I will have nothing to do with a bomb." Martinez lived in the country of the great storyteller Hans Christian Andersen, H.C. Andersen, and had the ability to make a fairy tale out of reality. One could say the opposite about Martinez. He made the fairy tale into reality. He transformed the eternal essence of the religions with their messages of limitless love into spiritual science. Only if, for God's creation becomes the highest value of humanity, can we limit the use of the powerful technologies discussed in this book to the salvation of the race from its destructive potentialities. Then, for the second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire. The authors, Thomas Bearden and Floyd Sweet, fervently believe they have come upon the fire for the second time, as allegorized by Desjardins. If so, let us all use the knowledge wisely. Russians and Americans do not need to make war. World peace depends on them. President Putin and President Trump understand this. The Democrats want World War III. The Democrats work for the Illuminati who want war. War is very profitable for the Illuminati and bankers. I've written 3 books about the Illuminati. I want people to understand why wars are created. We all need to work for world peace and listen to the Prince of Peace, Jesus. Bibliography. Roberto de Andrade Martins, Romanowski, and Voltas Pyle, Early Difficulties in the Interpretation of Voltaic Electricity. Dibner Byrne, 1962, Oersted and the Discovery of Electromagnetism, New York, Glasdale. Maxwell James Clerk, 1873, A Treatise on Electricity and Magnetism, Volume 1, Oxford, Clarendon Press. Also, Volume 2. And it goes on to list more references. Lists one reference, Hans Christian Oersted and the Romantic Legacy in Science. Ideas, Disciplines, Practices, Boston Studies, and Philosophy of Science. He states, this book owes its origin to the perception of a puzzling paradox. Hans Christian Oersted, the Danish scientist and philosopher who was one of the founders of modern physicists through the experimental discovery in 1820 of the interaction of electricity and magnetism, a key step and model for the further unification of forces of nature. Followers such as Maxwell and Einstein were, and today researchers are, enchanted by the hope for a completion of that grand program. In addition, Oersted's discovery of electromagnetism, his work in science included other fields, chiefly high-pressure physics and acoustics. Moreover, he belonged to that fascinating group of researchers who were deeply engaged in the romantic tradition of the nature philosophers influenced by Immanuel Kant and by religious, literary, and aesthetic currents. The plain fact is that there are no conclusions. If we must state a conclusion, it would be that many of the former conclusions of the 19th century science on philosophical questions are once again in the melting pot. Sir James Jeans on free will from physics and philosophy. In Franklin Levin Balmer, Main Currents of Western Thought. The scientific and philosophical speculations by Oersted and his circle also quickly stimulated the imaginations of other philosophers and scientists, including Gustavus Dietlif, Hinrichs, Andre Marie Ampere, and Michael Faraday, were also inspired by Oersted, whose work launched the transformation of civilization, often called the Second Industrial Revolution, based on the invention of motors, generators, and the pervasiveness of electricity in modern life. Costs $269 on Amazon.com. And it goes on to list more references, more sources. Uh, Source 68, Constantine Mail, 2006, wireless Tesla transponder, field physical basis for electrically coupled bidirectional far-range transponders according to the invention of Nikola Tesla. Softcom 2006-14, Internal Conference 2909-2006. IEEE and University Split, Faculty of Electrical Engineering, ISBN 953-6114-89-5. Page 67 to 78 is that source. He states Nikola Tesla was a Serbian-American inventor, electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, physicist, and futurist who is best known for his contributions to the design of the modern alternating current electricity supply system. A gifted researcher and voracious reader, Tesla chanced upon some forgotten volumes of natural science written by Goethe, Goethe. He had not been aware that Goethe, long before he chose poetry for the vehicle of his scientific themes, had written several magnificent tomes on the natural world. Tesla found to his wonder that Goethe had experienced the very same emotion. Goethe was aware of the new scientific trend and its implications. The reduction of nature to forces and mechanisms was utterly revolting to Goethe. Now Tesla found a notable compatriot in his experience. He secured a thorough collection of Goethe's scientific texts and read these to exclusion of all other philosophies. It was through this window that we may comprehend all of Tesla's scientific methods and later statements. He references a website, http://www.bibliotek.net/Tesla_Tesla_24.htm. For in Tesla, we see the quest for communication with nature, one based on faith that mind, sensation, consciousness, and ordained structure form the world foundations. The sense-validating qualitative theme again appears in Nikola Tesla. Armed with this foundation, he could filter and qualify every other new study with which he was presented. The best way to predict the future is to invent it, Peter Drucker said, and that's exactly what Tesla did. The wireless transmission of electricity discovered by Tesla would have prevented the metering of energy by existing power companies and their investors. That is the reason that J.P. Morgan withdrew financing from Tesla when he was building the Wardenclyffe Tower on Long Island to supply wireless power to the world. The wireless transmission of power and tapping of the energy in the core of the earth would go a long way to preventing the constant wars in the Middle East, in which many nations are seeking to conquer the oil fields, destroying millions of lives and squandering trillions of dollars in fruitless endeavors. Putting Tesla's ideas to practical use and continuing his development of intercontinental wireless transmission as unfinished one-clef tower. Attempted should be orchestrated by an international control organization and not be proliferated by nations only desirous of military domination of their neighbors, as is the sad case with nuclear energy. In Tesla's lab, he also conducted a range of experiments with mechanical oscillators, generators, electrical discharge tubes, and early X-ray imaging. He also built a wireless control boat, one of the first ever exhibited. Tesla elaborated in a famous article in Century magazine, quote, "Stationary waves in the Earth mean something more than mere telegraphy without wires to any distance. They will enable us to attain many important specific results impossible to otherwise. For instance, by their use, we may produce at will from a sending station an electrical effect in any particular region of the globe. We may determine the relative position or course of moving objects, such as a vessel at sea, the distance traversed by the same, or its speed. We may send over the earth a wave of electricity traveling at any rate we desire, from the pace of a turtle up to a lightning speed." End quote. An artist's depiction of a solar satellite that could send electrical energy by microwaves to a space vessel or planetary surface. Wireless high-power transmission using microwaves is well proven. Experiments in the tens of kilowatts have been performed at Goldstone in California in 1975 and more recently 1997 at Grand Basin on Reunion Island. These methods achieve distances on the order of a kilometer under experimental conditions. Microwave conversion efficiency was measured to be around 54%. In the early 20th century, before the electrical wire grid, Nikola Tesla devoted much effort towards schemes transport power wirelessly. However, typical configurations, e.g. Tesla coils, require excessively large electrical fields. Recent decades have witnessed increased use of autonomous electronic devices, laptops, cell phones, robots, PDAs, etc. Consequently, interest in wireless power has reemerged. Radiative transfer, which is perfectly suitable for transferring information, poses several difficulties for power transfer applications. The efficiency of power transfer is very low if the radiation is omnidirectional, and unidirectional radiation requires an uninterrupted line of sight and sophisticated tracking mechanisms. Wireless power transfer, wireless energy transmission, or electromagnetic power transfer is the transmission of electrical energy from a power source to an electrical load, such as an electrical power grid or a consuming device, without the use of a discrete human-made conductors. Wireless power is a generic term that refers to many different power transmissions technologies that use time-varying electromagnetic or electromagnetic fields. In wirelessly power transfer, a wireless transmitter connected to a power source conveys the field energy across an intervening space to one or more receivers, where it is converted back to an electrical current and then used. Wireless transmission is useful to power electrical devices in cases where interconnecting wires are inconvenient, hazardous, and/or not possible. Wireless power techniques mainly fall into two categories, non-radiative and radiative. In near-field or non-radiative technique, power is transferred by magnetic fields using inductive coupling between coils of wire, or by electric fields using capacitive coupling between metal electrodes. Inductive coupling is the most widely used wireless technology. Its applications include electronic toothbrushes, chargers, RFID tags, smart cards, and chargers for implantable medical devices like artificial cardiac pacemakers, and inductive powering or charging of electrical vehicles like trains and/or buses. A current focus is develop wireless systems to charge mobile and handheld computing devices such as cell phones. digital music players, and portable computers without being tethered to a wall plug. In far-field or radiative techniques, also called power beaming, power is transferred by beams of electromagnetic radiation like microwaves or laser beams. These techniques can transport energy longer distances but must be aimed at the receiver. Proposed applications for this type are solar-powered satellites and wirelessly powered drone aircraft. Japan and China both have national ambitions to begin an on-orbit testing of solar power transmission by the 2030s, which may accelerate both technical and regulatory processes. An important issue associated with all wireless power systems is limiting the exposure of people and other living things to potentially injurious electromagnetic fields. Tesla went on to pursue his ideas of wirelessly lighting and electrically distribution in his high-voltage, high-frequency power experiments in New York and Colorado Springs. He also made 1893 pronouncements on the possibility of wireless communication with his devices. When Nikola Tesla discovered alternating current AC electricity, he had great difficulty convincing men of his time to believe it. Thomas Edison was in favor of direct current electricity and opposed alternating current electricity strenuously. Tesla eventually sold his rights to his alternating current patents to George Westinghouse for $1 million. After paying off his investors, Tesla spent his remaining funds on his other inventions and culminating his efforts in a major breakthrough in 1899 at Colorado Springs by transmitting 100 million volts of high-frequency electricity power wirelessly over a distance of 26 miles, at which he lit up a bank of 200 light bulbs and ran one electric motor. With his supered-up version of his Tesla coil, Tesla claimed that only 5% of the transmitted energy was lost in the process. But broke of funds again, he looked for investors to back his project of broadcasting electrical power in almost unlimited amounts to any point on the globe. The method he would use to produce this wireless power was to employ the Earth's own resonance with its specific vibrational frequency to conduct AC electricity via a large electric oscillator. When J.P. Morgan agreed to underwrite Tesla's project, a strange structure was begun and almost completed near Mordencliffs in Long Island, New York, looking like a huge lattice-like wooden oil derrick with a mushroom cap. It had a total height of 200 feet. Then suddenly Morgan withdrew his support to the project in 1906, and eventually the structure was dynamited and brought down in 1917. He references a website, http://home.earthlink.net// DRESTINBLACK The Nikola Tesla Museum in Belgrade possesses Tesla's own slide, which confirms that the experiment described in the patent system of transmission of electrical energy was in fact carried out before the examiner-in-chief of the U.S. Patent Office. Tesla was focused in his research for the practical development of a system for wireless transmission of power and utilization system. Tesla said in On Electricity, Electrical Review, January 27, 1897, "In fact, progress in this field has given me fresh hope that I shall see the fulfillment of one of my fondest dreams, namely the transmission of power from station to station without the employment of any connecting wires." End quote. Tesla's Colorado Springs research was conducted in mid-May 1899. His objectives were to create transmitters of great power, individualization and isolating the energy transmission means, laws of propagating of currents through the earth and the atmosphere. Tesla spent more than half his time researching transmitters. Tesla spent less than a quarter of his time researching sensitive receivers and about a tenth of his time measuring the capacity of the vertical antenna. Tesla designed his communications and power broadcast systems based on his model of the Earth as a gigantic spherical capacitor plate, and the ionosphere as the other plate. He discovered the optimal resonant frequencies were 12 Hz and its harmonics. Also, the storm frequency at approximately 500 kHz worked best in his design. Tesla's basic designs of Earth's electrostatic system and his patents are shown below. In accordance with antenna theory, all links or circuits are required to be 1/4 wavelength or some odd multiple of it. The model of the Earth's elevated capacitor has two components: the capacity to ground, or abbreviated capital C, base G, lowercase g, and the capacity to the ionosphere, abbreviated capital C, lowercase base I. The values of the resonant frequencies can be determined from the Tesla equivalent circuit shown. Capital C base G is the bottom plate to ground, and both plates of this circuit include capital C base I. L2 and C3 represent the resonant step-down air core coupling. At the desired frequency. The high voltages Tesla obtained with this design requires extreme caution in duplicating his experiment. And he goes on to list more references for the book. It says, NASA is also paying attention to scalar waves to some degree. The paper titled Advanced Energetics for Aeronautical Applications, Volume 2, by David S. Alexander offers a review of scalar wave, or longitudinal wave, research. It mentions the work of Constantine Mail and others in the field. Interestingly, the paper also discusses how Dr. James Clerk Maxwell's original equation specifically allows for scalar or longitudinal waves. Only many years later did short-sighted scientists who did not care to deal with Maxwell's complex equations based in quaternion mathematics arbitrarily discard longitudinal waves. Due to this, many mainstream scientists still doubt their existence, despite the history and the mountain of evidence which proves they are very, very real. Constantine Mail has compared superluminal scalar waves to the neutrino, which also thought by some to travel faster than light. Neutrinos bombard the Earth in all directions. Most of them arrive from the central star of our solar system, the Sun. Because approximately half of the neutrinos are absorbed as they pass through the Earth, it is thought they may interact with the core and inner layers of our planet. In our atmosphere, our surroundings, and through our body, many types of energy flow in the same way, which we cannot directly perceive or notice any of them. But that does not mean that they are not without significance. On the contrary, they help very much in the creation of the foundation of our entire existence. Our whole mentality of our minds are created by these energies or substances. These substances appear, therefore, as previously mentioned, in reality only be the expression of the extension lines of the physical elements or matter, which are to be merely condensed consciousness or the materials of the soul. Livet's Log 2, paragraph 294. And he goes on to reference more sources for the book. Still more references. And then he references medical applications of electromagnetics. Mail Constantine, 2010, DNA and cell resonance, cellular communication as explained by field physics, including magnetic scalar waves. Then more sources. Lone Thomas Bioelectromagnetic Healing, a rationale for its use, Integrity Research Institution 2000. Bearden Tom, U.S. Office of Naval Research, report on the Priore machine. Parisi, Eric, effects of electromagnetic waves and magnetic fields on cancer and experimental trypanosomiasis, March 16th, 1984, University of Bordeaux. Keeps listing sources. I'm just kind of skimming them to see if there's anything relevant. I think that's it. That's the end of it. He lists like over 200 sources. No, he lists 123 sources. And then Appendix 1 states his last source he lists is source 123. It's W.O. Schumann, 1952. The Earth behaves like an enormous electric circuit. Given that the Earth's atmosphere carries a charge, a current, and a voltage, it's not surprising to find such electromagnetic waves. The Schumann resonance facilitates the natural resonance in the human body and helps to recover autonomic nerve balance, remove stress, and intensify concentration. The resonant properties of this terrestrial cavity were first predicted by the German physicist W.O. Schumann between 1952 and 1957, and first detected by Schumann and Koenig in 1954. The first spectral representation of this phenomenon was prepared by Balser and Wagner in 1960. The Schumann resonances are quasi-standing wave electromagnetic waves that exist in this cavity. Like waves on a spring, they are not present at all time, but must be excited to be observed. Schumann predicted that there are electromagnetic standing waves in the atmosphere within the cavity formed by the surface of the Earth and the ionosphere. The limiting dimensions of the Earth and conductive ionosphere cause this waveguide to act as a resonant cavity for electromagnetic waves in the extremely low frequency bands. This cavity is naturally excited by energy from lightning strikes. They are not caused by anything internal to Earth, its crust, or its core. They seem to be related to electrical activity in the atmosphere, particularly during times of intense lightning activity. They occur at several frequencies between 6 and 50 cycles per second, specifically 7.8, 14, 20, 26, 33, 39, 45 hertz, with a daily variation of about 0.5 hertz, plus or minus. So long as the properties of Earth's electromagnetic cavity remains about the same, these frequencies remain the same. Presumably, there is some change due to the solar sunspot cycle as the Earth's ionosphere changes in response to the 11-year cycle of solar activity. Schumann resonances are most easily seen between 2000 and 22 UT. Much of the research in the last 20 years has been conducted by the Department of Navy, which investigates extremely low-frequency communication with submarines. For medical purposes and diagnosis, the Schumann resonant facilitates the natural resonance in the human body and helps to recover autonomic nerve balance, remove stress, and intensify concentration. The human brain produces electromagnetic waves which lie in the range between 1 and 40 hertz. This spectrum is divided into 4 ranges in medical analysis, which are associated with different consciousness conditions. 1. Delta waves, 1 to 3 hertz. which characterize dreamless, deep sleep, and coma conditions. 2. Theta waves, 4 to 7 Hz, which are characteristic for deep sleep. 3. Alpha waves, 8 to 12 Hz, which occur in relaxed awake condition, e.g. in meditation or briefly before falling asleep and/or immediately after waking. 4. Beta waves, 13 to 40 Hz, which are dominant in the normal awake condition. For more information, see Handbook of Atmospheric Electrodynamics, Volume 1 by Hans Volland, Volland, 1995. Published by the CRC Press, Chapter 11 is entirely on Schumann resonances and is written by Davis Campbell at the Geophysical Institute, University of Alaska, Fairbanks, AK 99775. Appendix 1, DNA molecules can teleport, Nobel Prize winner claims. Luc Montagnier, a Nobel Prize-winning biologist, has ignited controversy after publishing details of an experiment in which a fragment of DNA appeared to teleport or imprint itself between test tubes. Luc Montagnier team surrounded 2 test tubes with a weak electromagnetic field of 7 Hz, one of which contained a tiny piece of bacteria DNA and the other pure water. The DNA was amplified using a polymerase chain reaction, and 18 hours later, the DNA was detected in the test tube, which only contained pure water. This phenomenon had not been detected previously, presumably because the DNA sample had to be diluted many times over for the experiment to work. Since the BASIS project are imprinted themselves across the space rather than simply moving from one place to another, Montagnier's team has given evidence of teleportation of DNA information. The apparent imprinting of the DNA on the water, a quantum effect, is normally assumed to occur in imperceptible fractions of a second, and not minutes and hours. In addition, quantum effects usually result at very low temperatures near absolute zero. Absolute zero is the lower limit of thermodynamic temperature scale, a state at which the enthalpy and entropy of a cooled ideal gas reaches its minimum value, taken as zero. Theoretical temperature is determined by extrapolating the ideal gas law. By international agreement, absolute zero is taken as negative 273.15 degrees on the Celsius scale, equal to negative 459.67 degrees on the Fahrenheit scale. What is startling about this biological process is that the underlying quantumness of the effect has occurred at room temperature. It is hard to understand how the information can be stored within water over a time scale longer than picoseconds, said Ruhr University in Bochum's Klaus Gerwer, who was quoted in the New Scientist magazine. Montagnier has met such skepticism regarding his experimental results, which could shake the foundations of several fields of sciences, if further corroborated by researchers. Theoretical chemist of Jeff Ramirez at University of Sydney, Australia, stated that these would be the most significant experiments performed in the past 90 years, demanding reevaluation of the whole conceptual framework of modern chemistry. All with scientific advances, there is a common pattern in the acceptance of new ideas. The central role of the little understood quantum properties of the water molecule, and not just its more obvious chemical bonding properties in the bioengineering of life forms, suggests that water might be a good medium in which DNA can copy itself using processes of quantum entanglement and teleportation. Using quantum field theory, Montagnier also has investigated the propagation of diseases. Scalar waves kill cancer cells, a sensational progress in cancer treatment. Appendix 2. Professor Konstantin Mail and the world's leading physicist in the research on scalar waves, both in theory and practice. There are 3 kinds of waves. Electromagnetic waves, Heinrich Hertz, well known to everybody. 2. Electric scalar waves, Nikola Tesla, only known by secret services and enlightened people, even called Tesla waves. And number 3, magnetic scalar wave, Constantine Mell, unknown. Mell figured out that the magnetic scalar wave is biological relevant, not the electromagnetic wave. Therefore, cell communication is done by magnetic scalar waves. It was detected that cancer cells mostly communicate with their own kind, not with healthy cells. So Mell poisoned cancer cells, and while dying, they send a special signal received only by other cancer cells, which causes them to die also. Healthy cells do not receive the signal, which is transmitted by magnetic scalar waves. Constantine Mell, with this method, only cancer cells are targeted. That is a huge difference to the chemotherapy from today, which target almost the whole body and often kill the patient slowly. White TV wants to point out that the killing of cancer cells with scalar waves is better than chemo, but not the optimum, because to attack cancer cells and tumors is only to attack the symptoms but not the cause of the cancer. Here are the methods that must be used. Here, other methods must be used. White TV will... No, that was soon. It was in German. The source is Scalar Waves Kill Cancer Cells from Hinrichs on Vimeo. Hinrichs is spelled Henning. Last name Witte on Vimeo. Then he has Appendix 3, the connection between Schumann resonance of the Earth and alpha rhythm of human brain waves. The transmission of longitudinal electric waves, like Mell, the famous experimental physicist Tesla had conducted a historical experiment 100 years ago and measured the properties of longitudinal electric waves. He patented his findings in the wireless transmission of energy in 1900. Tesla also discovered that more energy arrived at the receiver than was supplied to the transmitter in his experimental setup and called it a magnifying transmitter. By the effect backed on the transmitter, Tesla observed that the resonance of the Earth was 12 hertz. Since the Schumann resonance of a wave traveling at the speed of light is 7.8 hertz, Tesla concluded that his longitudinal electrical wave had traveled at 1.5 times the speed of light, therefore exceeding Einstein's calculations. At the time when Schumann published his research results in the journal Technische Physik, Dr. Anker Muir, a physician, immediately made the connection between the Schumann resonance and the alpha rhythm of brain waves. He found the thought of the Earth having the same natural resonance as the brain very exciting and contacted Professor Schumann, who in turn asked a doctorate candidate to research this phenomenon. This candidate was Herbert Koenig, who became Schumann's successor at Munich University. Koenig demonstrated a correlation between Schumann resonance and brain rhythms. He compared human EEG recordings with natural electromagnetic fields of the environment in 1979 and found that the main frequency produced by Schumann oscillations is very close to the frequency of alpha rhythms. Natural electromagnetic processes in the environment, human EEG readings in comparison. Schumann oscillations in EEG are rhythm as well as locally conditioned fluctuations of the electric field too, and the EEG-D rhythm show noticeably similar in their temporal variation from Koenig's 1979. Lightning discharges are considered to be the primary natural source of human Schumann resonance excitation. Lightning channels behave like huge antennas that radiate electromagnetic energy at frequencies below about 100 kilohertz. These signals are very weak at large distances from the lightning source, but the Earth ionosphere waveguide behaves like a resonator at L frequencies and amplifies the spectral signals from the lightning at the resonance frequencies. The real Earth ionosphere waveguide is not a perfect electromagnetic resonant cavity. Losses due to finite ionosphere electrical conductivity lower the propagation speed of the electromagnetic signals in the cavity, resulting in a resonance frequency that is lower than would be expected in an ideal case. And the observed peaks are wide. In addition, there are a number of horizontal symmetries, day-night difference in the height of the ionosphere, latitudinal changes in the Earth's magnetic field, sudden ionospheric disturbances, polar cap absorption, variation in Earth's radius of plus or negative 11 kilometers from equator to geographic poles, etc., that produce other effects in the Schumann resonance power spectra. Professor R. Weaver from the Max Planck Institute for Behavioral Physiology in Erlangen Index built an underground bunker which completely screened out electromagnetic fields. Student volunteers lived there for 4 weeks in the hermetically sealed environment. Professor Weaver noted that the students' circadian rhythms diverged, that they suffered emotional distress and migraine headaches as they were young and healthy. No serious health conditions arose, which would not have been the case with older people or people with compromised immune system. After only a brief exposure to 7.8 Hz, the frequency which had been screened out, the volunteers' health stabilized again. With the advent of new wireless technology, microwaves pulsed at frequencies close to Schumann resonances as in mobile telephony. Another threat is emerging. We may be creating an environment that is literally out of tune with nature itself. There is an urgent need for us to understand how everything alive responds to the subtlest changes in magnetic and electromagnetic fields surrounding us. For instance, we need to examine the possible interaction between magnetite crystals within cells and man-made magnetic fields in the environment. He references a website, http://www.earthbreathing.co.uk/sr.htm. Constantine Mell describes in this treatise DNA and cell resonance. Magnetic waves enable cell communication, how two cells communicate with each other, where the magnetic scalar wave uses the genetic code chemically stored in the base pairs of the genes and electrically modulates them. In the beginning was the information. Origin of life from the perspective of the computer science. What is information? Source of information, natural laws on information, far-reaching conclusions concerning the image of man, evolution and Big Bang that propagates in the direction of the magnetic field vector. Computed frequencies from the structure of DNA agree with those of the predicted biophoton radiation. The optimization of efficiency by minimizing the conduction losses lead to the double helix structure of the DNA. The vortex model of the magnetic scalar wave not only covers many observed structures within the nucleus perfectly, but also explains the hyperboloid channels in the matrix when two cells communicate with each other. Potential vortices are an essential component of scalar waves that is discovered in 1990. The basic approach for an extended field theory was confirmed in 2009 with the discovery of magnetic monopoles. For the first time, this provides the opportunity to explain the physical basis of life, not only from the biological discipline. Nature covers the whole spectrum of known scientific fields of research, and interdisciplinary understanding is required to explain its complex relationships. A characteristic of the potential vortex are significant. With its concentration effect, it provides for miniaturization down to a few nanometers, which allow enormously high information density in the nucleus. The magnetic scalar wave is suitable to use genetic code chemically stored in the base pairs of the genes and electrically modulate them. It then piggybacks information from the cell nucleus to another cell. At the receiving end, the reverse processes take place and transported information is converted back into a chemical structure. The necessary energy required to power the chemical process is provided by a magnetic scalar wave itself. He references a link, http:// www.k-me-enable.de/enable-cell-underscore communication.pdf. As effective scalar waves and resonance not only transmit information, but also energy, even a suitable model for the phenomenon of telekinesis is found. Just as the DNA wave radiates from a nucleus, a cell assembly, or even a human body, suitable waves can radiate in, that is, a person can absorb energy and information of people in whose aura he is, or by thinking of someone capable of working even over long distances. Sheldrake, 1995, Ingalls, 2011. No chemical process is more important to life on Earth than photosynthesis, a series of chemical reactions that allow plants to harvest sunlight and create carbohydrate molecules. Without photosynthesis, not only would there be no plants, the planet could not sustain life of any kind. In plants, photosynthesis occurs in the thylakoid membrane system of chloroplasts. Many of the enzymes that allow photosynthesis to occur are transmembrane proteins embedded in the thylakoid membranes. The chemistry involved and described at the following website: http://www.chemistryexplained.com/ny/pi/photosynthesis.html. And then it gives the biography of Hans Christian Ørsted in Appendix 4. And that completes this book.